Hello. Hi, Tracy. You're still muted. That's okay. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And Marie, I think we're all going to have we all need to be born with a mask going forward. Any babies that get born this year have to have a mask delivered with them or something. I don't know. Unbelievable. Andrew?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Hello, Janelle. Hope you're feeling well. Good.
Thank you, I am.
Good. Hope it stays that way.
Hello, Ted.
Hey, Rob, how are you doing? You need to click your video on yet.
Right, I will as soon as I finish eating this slice of toast.
Okay. That's fine. Anne Marie, Dean has joined us as well.
I was going to wait until, because we also have John Bozio. I was going to bring them
Okay.
up when it's time.
Yeah, good. That's fine. That's cool.
I'm waiting on Glenn.
Need Tim and Bonnie yet too. So. Hello, Rob.
They're not. Okay. Yeah, they're not on yet.
No.
Neither is Glenn.
Yeah.
I've just been watching the attendees.
So have I. There's Bonnie.
Okay, good.
And there's Tim. Oh, he needs Glenn now.
Well, let's see. He's got
Hello,
4
hello.
minutes.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Good to see you all. Is that a bird I hear in the background?
I'm outside, so I may be getting outdoor noises.
Okay,
I'll mute.
that's fine. Doesn't bother me at all, Anne Marie.
Your background suggests that you're outside, but it's daylight. It's not daylight here.
It's quite dark where I am right now.
Yeah, it's quite dark here. So,
Isn't it a little chilly outside?
I
hello,
got long
Chief.
sleeves on. Well, 3/4 length sleeves.
I suspect by the end of the evening, you're going to need a sweater or a jacket.
I'll be fine. I mean, this is a pretty heavy jacket on.
Okay.
Or I don't know what it is, jacket, sweater.
That's concerned for your welfare, but you know.
Right. Still looking for Glenn.
Yeah, we have one person who's chatting, wants to chat here. What's the comment?
Oh, yes.
Yes, we will.
Okay, so still not seeing Glenn.
We probably, given what we have first. We probably could start without him if we need to.
I mean, we've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, we'll just wait.
And,
We're not gonna
he's
start.
got, and he's got a way of coming in right at,
Yeah, he slides in at, you know.
That means he bills us less, right?
oh, you know what? He was waiting for the email from me, just going, I'm gonna tell him going through.
Oh, oops.
That's okay. Yeah, he's not seeing, for some reason, the emails that you all get an hour before the meeting aren't getting to him.
Is there a message in that?
What's that? Well, no, my guess is the email address has a typo or something.
I'm just kidding. While we're waiting for Glenn, if anybody has not signed in with their name and they've just signed in under another name, if you would sign in with your full name so we could identify you would be helpful. Thank you. Looks like most people have signed in.
All right, so Glenn is in. So.
And it's 6:30, Glenn's here. Hey, Glenn. Good.
Hi.
Good to see you. All right, so it is 6:30 on November the 9th, and we are here for the monthly meeting of Mayor and City Council. Thank you all for being here this evening, and hope you've all enjoyed the last several beautiful days of weather. They say on Wednesday it's going to end, so hopefully you got some beach time this weekend. Before we get started, I have several announcements I'd like to share with everyone. First of all, the oil spill cleanup has been complete, and the Coast Guard and DENREC have signed off on our beaches after a weekend which they had contractors covering all of Beach 1, collecting the oil-stained rack, as they call it, which is grasses and reeds that were at the high tide line. A very labor-intensive process that was completed yesterday afternoon, about 4 o'clock. So they are finished with our beach, and I know that many people were able to get out and enjoy the beaches over the weekend. So thank you everyone for your cooperation while we had the beaches closed for nearly the last 2 weeks. It was most helpful.
Hey, Ted, can I ask a question? This is kind of a historical question. Has there ever been a similar incident on Lewis beaches?
Bonnie, in nearly 40 years that I've been here, I don't recall something like this, not of this magnitude. So I don't believe so. Also, another good piece of news is the bridge work at Savannah Road Bridge is complete, and Art and Bloom has installed half of the mosaic panels. If you haven't had a chance to see them, hats off to Art and Bloom for the work, the many, many hundreds of hours, thousands of hours that the Art and Bloom personnel put in to develop those mosaic panels. There are 50 feet on one side, and the other 50 feet will be installed this week. They're really quite fun and interesting. And I think if people are stuck in traffic, it's certainly much better to look at that than a bare cement wall. And they're really, really enjoyable. So I commend Lorelei Meener for her idea and all of the Art and Bloom volunteers who put in all those hours to create that. I want to thank the chief and the police department for our drug take back. On Saturday, October 24th, the chief informs me we took back 118 pounds of unused prescription drugs. That's a nice number, a very large number. Good to get that out of the community. Remind everyone that City Hall will be closed until Thursday, and Wednesday is Veterans Day. So most businesses will, or not businesses, but most government offices will be closed on November the 11th. Also, City Hall will be closed the 26th and 27th of November in observance of Thanksgiving. And today, the BPW began work to replace the water line on Front Street. We've started at Chip Carpenter. Just a reminder to everyone that's on this call that there will be lane closures on Front Street and Pilottown Road for the next several months while this work goes on. They are working on the side of the road, but it does involve a lane closure. So there, I saw some fairly long lines of maybe 10, 12 cars this morning as things were moving along. So those are the announcements I have. Does anyone else have any other announcements? Okay, before we get started, I'd like to rearrange this agenda a little bit so that we cover some of the things that are that involve people who are here for this evening, so they don't have to sit through the entire meeting with us. So I'd like to move item I-5, which is the presentation on liquid natural gas transportation through the Delaware Bay, and item I-3, which is a discussion with Chesapeake, and item H2, which is the discussion about the merge wayfinding signs to the front of this meeting, and we'll do those before we go to any of the other items on the agenda. So having said that, I would like to introduce to you all Tracy Carluccio, who is here with us. She is the Deputy Director of the Delaware River Keeper Network, and she is here to talk to us about a proposal which would involve the transportation of liquid natural gas down the Delaware Bay, out through the mouth of the bay, and the environmental concerns that might be related to that. So Tracy, you can unmute yourself, and we'd like to go forward with your presentation. I believe you have a slide presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the time here tonight. I greatly appreciate being given time at a public meeting. We know how important these meetings are, particularly during COVID. Seems like everything is, you know, a little more difficult to do. So thank you for taking this important time out of your meeting. I really appreciate it. I'm Deputy Director of Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and I'm here on behalf of our organization and other organizations whose members live in Delaware. So we have a slideshow, and very kindly, I think it's Janine is going to be, or Anne-Marie, somebody's going to be advancing the slides. So thank you very much. So the question is, what does it mean for Luz, this proposed transport of liquefied natural gas by ship? So next slide, please. So this, to set the stage, is where the Gibbstown Logistics Center is located. It's where that red X is, and that's in Greenwich Township, Gloucester County, New Jersey, right on the Delaware River. It's actually, as you can see, Claymont, it's actually just a few miles upstream from the Delaware state line, and not that far from Wilmington. It's about 2.5 miles from Chester, which is the last dense urban area before you reach Delaware. And that logistics center has one dock at it. It's not operating yet. It was built to receive automobiles and vegetables and some hazardous gases, liquefied hazardous gases, but not, importantly, not liquefied natural gas. The proposal to export liquefied natural gas is a separate application to build a second dock at this facility. It would potentially triple the activity at the facility because there's one dock at the berth that's already been built. Like, as I said, it's not operating yet. But the second dock, which is being considered by the Delaware River Basin Commission at their meeting on December 9th, would have two spots for these large liquefied natural gas ships to move in and be loaded. It would be around the clock, 24-hour a day, 365-day a year perpetual loading operation. Takes about 2 weeks to fill one of these ships from the train cars and the trucks that would deliver it to the site. There's no pipeline. It's a unique and we think an extremely hazardous and dangerous situation. There's no other terminal that operates at this volume of activity that's operating currently in the United States. So the ships would leave, what's proposed is ships would leave where that red X is, and it would travel downstream in the navigation channel. Next slide, please. It would go past Wilmington. Well, here you see it going past, excuse me, a couple of the islands there. That's Chester Island right in front of Chester. Then it would move south along. This is tracing the next slide. The next, the navigation channel on down past Wilmington. And as you can see, it goes down the Delaware River estuary and then through the bay. It goes past all of the municipalities and cities and beaches, bay shores that are along the bay there, probably closer to Delaware than to New Jersey, just because of the way New Jersey geographically pulls back landside from the bay as you get closer to the ocean. So, and then next slide, please. As it moves down, it goes past the loos and then the beaches, and then travels down along the beach areas out into the open sea, where all of the gas would be exported overseas for sale. So according to the environmental impact report that was prepared back when the coastal zone management plan was put together for your state, for Delaware, it was said in there that this navigation path would travel as close as a mile to Lewes and Rehoboth Beach as it travels out to sea. Next slide, please. So why is this dangerous? Well, I would like to just point out a very important fact, and that is that LNG is so dangerous that the state of Delaware's administrative code actually prohibits the development of liquefied natural gas terminals in the entire coastal zone in Delaware, and that's under current law based on safety and environmental issues. I have a lot more information on that, and I can share with you the entire environmental impact statement that was done, and also sections of it that seem particularly pertinent. But under current law, it's actually banned in Delaware along the coastal zone. And all of those details in that environmental impact statement look at what would it do to the coastal zone? What would it do to communities that are near to the bay? And this is a picture of the typical type of ship that would be used. These are not the ships that are carrying what's called natural gas liquids or liquefied hazardous gases from Marcus Hook down the river and out to the sea now. Those are about half the size of this. They're much smaller. This is an extremely large ship. These very large ships do not travel up carrying LNG on the Delaware River estuary or bay at all today. Next slide, please. So quickly, just to recap the concerns that have been raised not only by my organization, Surfrider, who is very concerned about this in terms of the impacts to the beaches and the communities along the beaches, and many other organizations such as the League of Women Voters of Delaware, the Delaware Sierra Club, and then lots of organizations in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York in a multi-state coalition. What concerns us and experts is the special properties of liquefied natural gas. It's very different than any other material, hazardous material that's being transported now by ship. Once it's released, because it's a liquid that is kept at what they call supercooled temperatures, minus 260 degrees, it expands immediately when it hits the atmosphere. So you can't stop it. So if there is an inadvertent release to the atmosphere, like a puncture hole or something like that, it starts and it completely empties from the container that it's held in, and it can't be controlled by a valve or anything. It happens instantaneously. And when it does, it expands to 600 times in volume, because that's what they compress it down to in order to be able to transport it overseas. The thing about this is that the vapor that comes out is very cold. It's been cooled down to this very low temperature, and as it comes out, it's so cold that anybody within about a quarter mile can actually be killed, because it robs the oxygen from the air as it warms up. Also, the coldness can actually freeze your skin and cause burns to the skin that can be deadly. Also, it causes the embrittlement of any kind of steel, which makes steel containers very, temporary in terms of storage. You can't use steel containers without a lot of other reinforcement for any period of time because of that. You have to have double walls and that sort of thing. These ships have double walls, but if the single wall of the bladder or the container within the ship, which usually there's 2 or 3 of them in the ship, if that breaks, it fills that annulus in between the bladder that holds the gas. And should there be an accident, like a puncture, it would go directly out onto the water. Then if it does hit the water, a couple things can happen. One, what they call a rapid phase transition. That is, it moves very quickly as it changes from a liquid to a vapor and then evaporates. And when it does that, it can actually explode even without any ignition. It's called like a dry explosion, or explosion that's a flameless explosion. And it has a lot of force to it, so much force that it's equated by experts to a thermobaric bomb. It's a huge amount of energy released immediately. And if it does hit an ignition source, and an ignition source can be something like a switch on a car, it can be a very light ignition. It doesn't need to be a big fire. It burns very hot, and it burns back to the source of the fire. So that fire would catch, it would then move back to the source of the fire, causing a very long, large fire, depending on how far it moved before it hit the ignition source. And according to the emergency management handbook that firemen use in the United States, it can't be extinguished. You simply have to stand back and let it burn out. They try to evacuate as well as they can, but there have been accidents where people have been basically burnt alive because the fire cannot be put out. Also, it causes, as you can imagine, tremendous structural damage. The worry being, for instance, the Delaware Memorial Bridge, or any other structure, a power plant, like the Salem nuclear power plant. Anything that is close by could actually be affected by that fire, and you can't put it out. It has to just go its course. As far as ships are concerned, there was a report done by the General Accounting Office for Congress that said that what happens in a ship can be particularly risky, because if one bladder were to leak, it can cause a cascading failure as the heat rises within that annulus area between the bladder and the outer hull of the ship. And so that cascading failure, according to the GAO, and then also the Congressional Reporting Service, can be what they call, quote unquote, catastrophic. That means loss of life and tremendous structural damage. We're very concerned also because there is not a lot of training on how to respond to liquefied natural gas releases. And there's supposed to be emergency response training, but it hasn't been done yet. And also, just to let you know, we have been trying to get a lot of information about this project since it first came to light, which was last year. We only discovered it was underway through a Freedom of Information Act request that we actually had to sue to get. So this has been very much kept under wraps and there's not been exposed to the public, to let the public know what's going on, which is why I'm so happy that you've allowed me to present this tonight, because without people hearing about it through meetings like this, and then perhaps a newspaper article here or there, people just don't know what's in store. And Delaware only has one way to vote on this. You do not have the ability through your government to deny or give a permit for this project. It's given by New Jersey and by the Army Corps of Engineers, and importantly here, by the Delaware River Basin Commission. So the resolution that has been shared with you is aimed at influencing the Delaware River Basin Commission and Governor Carney's vote on that commission. The 4 governors of the states that flow to the Delaware River, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, all have a representative through their governor on the Delaware River Basin Commission. There's also a federal representative, Army Corps of Engineers, representing the federal government. And that commission is the commission I mentioned at the very beginning. On December 9th, will most likely be making their decision about whether or not to allow the project to go ahead. So we have been working since August in various towns in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and now Delaware is just beginning to present resolutions to local governments for their consideration, so we can make sure that the governors that are going to be voting on this know what their constituents think. it's a little bit out of, the normal process, because there isn't a process for Delaware to vote on this except through Governor Carney's vote on the Delaware River Basin Commission. So I think that's my last slide. Is that right? Yeah, so I'm open to questions. I hope I didn't go on too long there, Becker.
No, you're fine. Thank you very much. It was a very informative presentation. And all members of council have received the model resolution that you mentioned, and we'll be considering that. It's not on the agenda to consider it tonight, but we have ample opportunity to consider it before the December 9th. But I would open the floor to questions from members of council. And then we also have had comments from MER, Suzanne Thurman, who is executive director of MER, and she may want to comment as well. She did provide some comments about what a catastrophic event could mean for the marine life. And so let's open it up to the floor. Open the floor up to members of council first for questions, if you're ready, Tracy. Okay. Any questions?
I have a question.
Okay, Tim.
Thank you, Tracy, for your presentation. Can you tell me how long liquefied natural gas has been transported by ship? Is this a new way of transportation, or has this been in place for a long period of time?
Liquefied natural gas has been transported by ship for several years. What's different about this facility is it would be the first one in the Delaware River Basin. It would be the first one that would be using a facility. It's about 80 some miles from the Gibbstown Logistics Center to the ocean. There's only one other facility that is upstream like that. That's at Cove Point in the Chesapeake. Other than that, it's fairly new for facilities that are not located directly on the coast. Most of the exports and the facilities that have existed over a long period of time have the liquefied natural gas liquefaction plant right at the coast. And then they liquefy it there, and it goes directly into a ship. To do that, it takes 2 days. To fill a ship at Gibbstown takes 2 weeks. So the difference here is that it's not on a coast where they're directly going out on the ocean. So they're not exposing nearly as many communities to the danger of the passing ships, because they're out on the open ocean as opposed to being upriver, like they would be in Gibbstown.
So the 2 weeks that you mentioned for filling the freighter up at this port, is part of that is the transportation time from the port back down to the ocean. Is that correct?
No, I'm
Or
sorry.
is that a reflection of the size of these ships? Go ahead.
It's a reflection of two things.
Okay.
Most liquefied natural gas facilities, I think it's actually all but one in the United States, have a pipeline going to them.
Right.
So they don't have trucks and train cars delivering the gas. So and they have storage facilities at the terminal. This facility, in order to avoid that type of regulation and oversight, they decided they did not want to have storage on site, and they didn't want to have a pipeline, because that would have kicked in the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the Pipeline Hazardous Material and Safety Administration reviews, which take a couple years. So they did a shortcut, and instead they said, building pipelines is controversial, it takes a long time. Instead, they do what they call, a unique delivery system, what we call a virtual pipeline. And over 200 miles of communities are actually being exposed to the danger by rail car and or by truck in order to get the material, the liquefied natural gas, down to the terminal, where it then is directly loaded onto the ships. Now, once it's loaded onto the ship, it does take a couple weeks, which we think is extremely dangerous to be handling that material. The industry says the most dangerous operation in liquefied natural gas transport is the transloading, when you're taking it from one container to another, because that's when human error happens. That's when, a coupling comes apart, a hose fails. And so the industry tries to avoid that. This is a very different type of operation, and not by a large company, by a company that is new to this type of what they call energy work. So when it leaves the facility, it goes down the river and it moves, through and just in a fairly quick pace.
Thank you very much for that explanation.
Rob, you had a comment?
You're talking to me, Ted?
Yes.
And kind of follow up to Tim's question. Ms. Carluccio, thank you very much and you seem deeply knowledgeable. We all know in the States what happens with an oil spill. Has there been any experience of an LNG spill?
There have been. You don't really call them a spill because it turns into a gas as soon as it hits the atmosphere. So a spill is kind of a misnomer for it. But there have been LNG releases. There was one in China just this year. 136 people were killed, and several blocks of a city were blown up. So that was just one LNG truck. We're talking about a ship. And even though you can't completely equate the force of a nuclear bomb with this, it has the force of many Hiroshima bombs being carried in this ship. And a lot of people think that's too sensational a comparison to make. And there's a little bit of difference because nuclear is different than a regular thermobaric bomb. But the force of energy that's being carried in the ship is tremendous. And that's our concern, is that should there be an accident when it's a mile or two offshore, say Wilmington, we would have catastrophic event. People would die. And the same thing could happen for other communities, and Lewes in particular, because as it was pointed out in the environmental impact statement, that navigation path can come within a mile of Lewes or Rehoboth as the ship is moving through, and out into the ocean from the bay.
Thank you.
Andrew, looks like you have a comment.
I just have I wanted to get some feedback from a couple of the hands that were raised. As you may know, Ms. Carlucci, we have a lot of history of shipping up and down the channel. So therefore, not many of our residents, but we have pilots who live in our community here. It's pronounced Lewis, by the way.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So I would actually like to hear from, if we could, from either Stuart Griffin or Captain Cuff from the Pilots Association, if we could elevate them. And I apologize if there are other council people that want to speak first, but my thoughts are there. I think we should get that side of it, which is from the transportation, so we can hear what that's like on a day-to-day.
Right. So Mr. Griffin had his hand up, so I
He's elevated.
unmuted him.
Good evening, everyone. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for having me. The Zoom connection was a little spotty, so I wasn't able to follow all of Mrs. Carluccio's presentation, but I did my best. And for background, I'm a Lewis resident and also a Delaware River and Bay pilot for about 25 years now. And I actively pilot ships up and down the river, many of which the sort of which were referred to in the presentation. Furthermore, for the last 4 years, I've been the chairman of the Mariners Advisory Committee for the Bay and River Delaware, which is the harbor safety committee for the port. And in my role as the chairman for the harbor safety committee for the port, I directly participate in the assessment process, which was undertaken to evaluate the suitability for the terminal there at Repauno, Gibbstown for Dock 1. So that is the dock that is now been constructed and is expected to begin exporting gas through ships, probably sometime in early 2021. So the resolution that the river keepers forwarded along refers mostly to Dock 2. So I have actively participated in the evaluation process and the waterway suitability assessment process is led by the Coast Guard, but it is a very broad stakeholder process that seeks to evaluate every aspect of transit of these vessels on the river from the moment they arrived at the sea buoy, pilot boarding, river transit, berthing, time alongside, loading and transshipment processes, preparation for departure, and then in the entire outbound transit. And that process is an exhaustive one with folks like the pilots, the Coast Guard, first responders from all 3 states involved, state police, so law enforcement, basically any potential responding agency that could be involved in a problem associated with the passage or terminal accident of one of these vessels, to look at exhaustively every possible problem and try to rate the risk, and then look at mitigations, and basically give the Coast Guard, who sort of acts as judge and jury in this process, all the information necessary to determine if they believe that the risk associated with a new terminal like this and the passage of these types of vessels is acceptable or unacceptable. So the outcome of that process, as you all probably can imagine, allowed for the construction of the Gibbstown terminal there at Rapano for Dock 1. And this resolution is speaking to Dock 2. So I just wanted to give that as background to sort of speak to the evaluation for the facility, and also to make it clear that this Dock 2 is going to be right next to Dock 1. Now, I certainly share the Riverkeeper's concerns with the safety of hazardous cargoes, but it's very important to consider that hazardous cargoes are what we do every day. We specialize in evaluating and mitigating the risk associated with the movements of large volumes of extremely hazardous cargoes. And very specifically, gas carriage by ship is something that happens on the Delaware River every single day. We actively export Marcellus shale gas in the form of ethane, butane, and propane, to name just a few. It's also of note that the current gas export products that are carried down the river in ships to foreign ports, those 3 that I spoke of, are less stable than LNG, which would be exported from the Gibbstown terminal. So I don't have a position with respect to fracking, with respect to the terminal's processes. Those were evaluated by the Coast Guard. Our job, my specific job in this process, has been to look at how safely can we get these ships up and down the river, the interactions with communities along the shore. We looked at really specific things like population centers and distances from an uncontrolled release and things like that. And Mrs. Carluccio made some valid points, and I naturally share her concerns about a catastrophic accident. I just would say that, in the interest of perspective, it's very accurate to say that the Delaware state licensed pilots that bring ships up and down this river, we on a daily basis move large volumes of petroleum gas cargoes up and down this river safely. And we have no reason to believe that we can't continue to protect both the safety and the lives of Delaware residents and visitors, as well as the environment of the state. We serve to protect the interests and the safety of the state. And there's no reason to believe that we can't continue to do so with respect to this specific terminal. I also am a little bit, perhaps, as I admitted, the connection was a bit faulty. So the ask to ask the Lewis City Council to weigh in on a resolution about shoreside transloading processes in a terminal that's about 75 miles away from Lewis in a different state. I think it's a big ask, and so I wanted to speak specifically to Lewis and to what I see as any potential interactions between these vessels of this type and the facilities that you're going to see, the facility in question. Also in the PowerPoint by Mrs. Carluccio, there was a picture of a gas tanker, and she suggested that those were dramatically larger than current gas export size ships. I'm afraid to say that is not true. We are exporting gas in vessels of that size from the Sun facility at Marcus Hook already, both ethane and propane and butane. So those ships are quite normal for us. We pilot much larger ships with crude oil cargoes on a regular basis as well. And I just wanted to do my best to indicate to the council the nature of this being really what we do on a daily basis. I'm not advocating for or against the facility, but rather wanted to speak to the interaction of these cargoes as they are close to Lewis and what we see as a realistic concern. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions if I am able to do so.
Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate your bringing this perspective to us. Thank you. Ms. Carluccio, did you want to respond at all? Or?
Well, I appreciate the comments from Mr. Griffin. I just wanted to say a couple things. Liquefied natural gas is different than the hazardous gases that are presently being taken downstream on these ships. It's kept at there is no other shale gas that is kept at minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit. And the extremely cold temperature and the fact that that allows them to compress it down by 600 to 620 times is what makes this a totally different ballgame. It is not the same as liquefied hazardous gas. And I would also like to say that I'm sure, you know, with the Sun facility, you may have these large, and I wasn't talking about crude oil ships. I know they're very large. I was talking about the Marcus Hook facility, which is in a similar location in terms of length of Delaware that's exposed to the shipping traffic. And those ships are much smaller than these ships. And I'd be happy to follow up by showing you in the permits from the Gibbstown facility, the size of the ships that are allowed, and then the size of the ships that are being used at Marcus Hook. They're much smaller. So I just want to make that clear. The unique hazards of liquefied natural gas have been recognized by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. It's been recognized by the Congressional Resource Service, by the General Accounting Office, and also the transport by rail has been actually litigated. It's under appeal by 14 attorneys generals from across the United States because of the danger of moving liquefied hazardous gas in containers on rail tracks. Now, that's not the same thing as a ship. However, the reason that they're doing that is because of the safety issues associated and the unique hazards posed by liquefied natural gas as opposed to liquefied hazardous gases like propane and ethane and butane. And one last thing, Dock 1 is not permitted to ship liquefied natural gas. I want to make that absolutely clear. The U.S. Coast Guard did a water suitability assessment, and I agree, it's a robust review that they do, but they did it based on one dock at one wharf. This would triple that size, and liquefied natural gas is not permitted under the Army Corps of Engineers permit or the Delaware River Basin Commission permit or the New Jersey DEP permit from Dock 1. So even though a water suitability assessment has been done for just one out of 3 docks, 3 wharfs, or what they call a berth, it does not mean that there has been an analysis done of Dock 2 and the entire Gibbstown Logistics Center export terminal functioning at build-out. That's what we're concerned about. That's why we want this Dock 2 stop now, because they have not done the proper assessment. The Coast Guard only looked at Dock 1 and the traffic from Dock 1, and they did not allow liquefied natural gas in the permits that were given by the federal government, the interstate agency government, and the state government. It's not allowed.
Thank you. One of the questions that came across, and maybe you can answer this, is does it require unanimous vote of the state of New Jersey, Army Corps, and the River Basin Commission, or is it a unanimous vote of the three entities?
Simply a simple majority, 3 out of 5. There's 5 votes. It
So it's-
requires 3 votes. It was a decision that was endorsed, positively by a majority to put this project on hold. They were going to vote on it September 9th, and they decided to delay it to have more time to review an extensive record that had been produced through our Delaware Riverkeeper Network's appeal of the Delaware River Basin Commission permit. So a majority of the state representatives, the governors, voted to do that. The Army Corps voted against it.
Okay. We have one other question in the chat that says, can someone speak to the number of ships proposed versus the current number of ships? Stuart, you may have a number on the current number of ships, but it goes on to say this impact of the number of failure, even if the probability are current. Stuart, do you have a comment on the number of ships that are currently being transported through the bay?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Overall, we're doing probably, I mean, well, gosh, we're upwards of 5,000 movements a year. If we're talking specifically about gas ships, I don't have hard numbers for you,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, but I'm gonna speculate. Okay, I've got 800 movements, gas movements a year, and just came through from a colleague who's on the call as well. And specifically, Dock 1 is, as I understand it, anticipates 2 ships a month. And Ms. Carluccio referred to a 2-week loadout time there at the berth. So that only allows for 2 ships a month at Dock 1. I do not have numbers on Dock 2, but
It's actually quicker at Dock 1. Sorry to interrupt. It's quicker at Dock 1 because they're smaller ships. They're not these big giant ships. They're the butane ships. They're smaller. So they're not allowed to take that same size ship at Dock 1 that they're hoping to get approval for at Dock 2.
Okay.
So it'll be quicker loading them. I think they said there was 37 passages a year, if I remember right, from Dock 1.
37 a year. Okay.
That's what I remember off the top of my head.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. It's been a very good, yes, Bonnie, I'm sorry, didn't see you put your hand up there.
That's
Thank
okay. That's okay. Can I just try to summarize quickly? Thank you, Ms. Carluccio and Stuart. This has been very, very helpful. What I hear is agreement between Ms. Carluccio and Stuart Griffin about the fact that this particular gas that's being shipped is very hazardous. Stuart mentioned that that he shared that concern. I guess the other thing that I have all the faith in the world in Stuart and his colleagues to properly pilot the ships. I guess the concern I have is an accident on the ship itself that's beyond the scope of what the pilots are there to help with. I guess what I'm also hearing is that the location of this particular facility, not on the coast, to me doesn't make any sense. I mean, whether it is to avoid certain regulatory oversight or not, I certainly can't say, but to purposely put this kind of a facility so far from open water seems very odd to me. So I'm just trying to synthesize what I think we're being told here. And I guess what you're asking, Ms. Carluccio, is for us to adopt this resolution or something similar, expressing the concern of Lewis about the possibility of an onboard accident in our vicinity. And it sounds like we're talking about, I'm sorry, what was it, 27 ships a year from Dock 1? Was that
37? 37.
So 37 from Dock 1 and an unknown number from Dock 2, but let's assume it's the same volume and it's a larger ship, right?
It's a larger ship, yes.
Okay, so we're up to, by my math,
74.
74 ships, so that's one every couple of days going past Lewis with this ultra hazardous material on it. So I just, both for Ms. Carluccio and for Stuart, have I said anything that, in trying to summarize, have I said anything that is incorrect?
The only thing I would say is the applicant has said that they don't think they're going to have as many ship movements of LNG as they will have ship movements from Dock 1. So I don't know that the math exactly works there.
Okay.
And the Coast Guard itself said that they were thinking that, or I'm sorry, not the Coast Guard, the Army Corps said they were thinking that it might not appreciably increase beyond the 37 ship movements a year, depending on how many ships they actually have going out. Our point is that they will have 3 berths, and the 37 was from 1 berth. So why would they build 2 more berths and not use them? If there's going to be no increase in ship traffic. So it's just, I don't really have a good answer. I just didn't want you to think that the math is set in stone, because we actually have had a difficult time trying to figure out all of that. From what we know, it's about 5 million gallons a day of liquefied natural gas that'll be going out the Delaware, but it'll be going about every 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So,
Okay.
Captain Cuff has his hand up, and he is able to unmute himself. So,
Yes. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mayor and Town Council, thank you very much for giving the time and letting me speak here tonight. I just wanted to reiterate some of Captain Griffin's remarks, and also Ms. Carluccio's, concern for the environment and for the welfare of all Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey residents. Little background, I've been a pilot for 20-some years now on the Delaware. I am now the president of the association, and as Captain Griffin said, we work very closely and are very concerned about safety. I do want to clear a couple little things up. We're talking about the Gibbstown dock that is 73 miles from the sea buoy. Currently, we have a LNG terminal on the Chesapeake Bay called Cove Point, which is actually further from the sea buoy and goes through more populated areas on the Chesapeake Bay than the Gibbstown berth would. Secondly, the vessels that are on those PDFs that Ms. Carluccio has put up there are the exact size of the vessels that we currently take in and out of Marcus Hook for propane, butane, the Marcellus shale gas. I do it every day, and again, I am the president of the association, and they are the exact same size. And just a little bit of background, we're talking, I'll even give you, let's say it's a ship a week. Let's say that we're going to do 52 ships a week. At Marcus Hook currently right now, we're doing anywhere from a slow week to 3 to 5, and a busy week 7 to 10. And as Captain Griffin said, these are propane, butane, stuff like that, a liquefied petroleum gas. And, this is kind of the new way of the world now, as we all understand. Marcus Hook and Paulsboro have become now, instead of crude oil, this is our new energy. We are exporting all of these products. And again, I'm not an expert in safety or loading and unloading of these ships. I just want to let everyone be well aware that we as pilots, and I think, Mr. Mayor, I think you said it or somebody else did, that we take that very seriously. We like to pride ourselves that we haven't had any accidents like that. We work together with the Coast Guard and all local authorities to make sure that the process goes safe from start to finish. And as far as I know, and again, we can't predict a catastrophe, but Cove Point in Maryland, who I worked very closely with the pilots in Maryland and have discussed this multiple times, they've had 0 issues, and it works very smoothly, and it's done in a very safe manner. So I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to clear it up some of the things there and reiterate what Captain Griffin said. And I appreciate you letting me speak tonight. And if there's any questions, I'll gladly answer them. But thank you again for the time.
Thank you very much, Captain Cuff. I think there's obviously lots of information here. I do think it would be worthy of our time to learn a little bit more about the Cove Point operation and what concerns are there before we take any action on this. And I'm sure in the next week or so, we could probably learn quite a bit. I think we've had a very helpful discussion here tonight about pointing out both aspects of this. And so I do think there's a lot to learn. Unless someone else has something else they would like to add at this point, I think we'll go ahead and study this a little further, bring it back up for further consideration about whether or not we want to adopt a resolution about this.
Thank you very much. Will there be a date that you'll be doing that I should plan on listening
Well,
back in?
we have a meeting scheduled next week on the 16th at this point, and we could conceivably add it to that, assuming we had enough information.
We
We'll
would
send
need to
you
add it
info.
quickly because we're within the 7 days after today, so.
Right. So, Rob, you had a question.
No, it was just that point. That
Okay.
the next regular
We
meeting
will.
will be after the vote by the Delaware River Basin Commission.
Right. They told us, Tracy told us that their vote is scheduled currently for the 9th of December. So we do have time to get some, if we don't make it on the 16th, we can certainly figure out another meeting, I think, to do something with this, or at least further consider it. Okay. There's nothing further. I think we should move on. We have a lot of other things on the agenda. Tracy, I appreciate your taking time to be here tonight, and we'll be in touch, okay? Thanks. Again, thank you for your interest and your participation in this discussion. I'd like to move on to elevate Dean Holden, if we could, Anne Marie, so he could join us to talk to us about Chesapeake. And as we know, we've had a franchise agreement with Chesapeake for just over 9 years, and it's coming up for renewal next September. And Dean is going to give us a little bit of information about what's been done, and then I know there's questions from council regarding the next steps and where we are, and as we begin to look at the renegotiation of this franchise agreement. So Dean, if you're there, you're not there yet. Oh, there he is. He hasn't clicked his camera on yet. Dean, are you going to click your camera on tonight?
I just tried to. Can you hear me, Mayor?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Let me see. Maybe it's the other side. Does that show my video?
Nope.
No. Try the rear camera. I'm not sure about the camera. This is the first time I've done Zoom through this computer, so my apologies there for the camera. So, Mayor, Council, members of the public, appreciate the opportunity to come back. Oh, there I see a photo. So we met with you and Council about 2 months ago. We talked a lot about our expansion efforts and other. The Mayor and I have had a discussion or two about the franchise, and he asked if I would come back to speak to specific issues around the franchise or answer other questions that maybe follow up to the discussion we had prior. And so, you know, a quick primer on the franchise. The Mayor's correct. It was signed in 2011. It's a 20-year non-exclusive franchise, similar to a lot of the franchises we have in other municipalities in the state. And so we are certainly, you know, here to answer what questions you might have about it, or jump into other topics as you would like to. So, Mayor, I don't know if you want to go to any questions, or if there were other items you wanted me to speak directly to.
I think we obviously the expansion of natural gas in Lewis. You started off with reaching the hospital and SPI Pharma initially, and then your ability to reach into residential areas has been very. Obviously, it's much easier for you to reach into newly developed areas than it is to get into areas that are not. And then the other issue, obviously, is the amount of participation that you need from any given area within the city in order to expand. If you could comment briefly on those two things, I think that would be helpful for council.
Certainly, and as we talked about the last time, you know, our expansion efforts are governed by tariff we have with the PSC, we have to be able to show that the costs of the extension are going to be paid for by the new customers. We can't expand on the backs of existing ratepayers and increase rates to be able to get to new customers. We talk some about extension into new communities that are under development is an easier economic test to make, in part because one person, aka the developer or the builder, is the individual who gets to commit to natural gas, and so that commits then a large number of expected homes. And the infrastructure is a little less expensive to put in, but it really is much more about the commitment of a large number of homes at a single time. So expansion into what we would call a conversion community, which is an existing community. And so in conversion communities, you're going to have a mix of oil, heat pumps, propane, other heat sources within the homes. And you're going to have varying interest in committing to natural gas at any one time. And so that makes those extensions more challenging. We still work very hard at it. We've had, and it's an interesting thing, and I understand very clearly in talking to members in Lewis, to council, to the mayor, to Anne Moody, that there's frustration at the pace of penetration of natural gas in Lewis, and I understand that frustration. It's our role and the folks that I work with role to make those expansions possible. We work very hard at it. But it is just it's a real challenge, right? And so one example I thought of after we spoke about 2 months ago was our extension from along 4th Street from Market to, I guess we were going to the north. And so we did a survey in conjunction with Lewis in 2016, just about 4 years ago. And along that alignment, 14 or 15 individual homes responded to the survey and said they were interested in natural gas. And in about a year since we've had this line in, we've only been able to get 2 of those customers to actually sign an application. And that's just testament to the challenges of a homeowner and interest in a homeowner to actually commit to, whether it's the time with a contractor, whether it's the conversion costs, whether it's switching their hot water from an electric hot water heater to a natural gas hot water heater, but it's all of those things that make it a challenge. So we recognize those challenges. I would also say that we look at our success in Lewis as one of our success communities versus other communities that we are really challenged to get into. And Milford is one that, if you look at the maps of our infrastructure, it looks a little bit like a donut. We got to Milford after the downtown center had been developed. We were able to get around the exterior of Milford through new communities and commercial entities, but we have had a real challenge into getting into downtown Milford. And so we see this over and over again in communities that didn't have a historical gas and light utility that existed, like Lewis or Cambridge or Dover did. So it's I hear the frustration. We understand that frustration. We work very hard to get gas in. Lewis has been a great partner with us to do partnered surveys, to share with us where construction projects are going on, to share with us leads that we might not have heard from elsewhere. And so we're very keen to continue that. We have talked some about other mechanisms that we use in other communities. One that's really of interest might be the system improvement rate that our Sandpiper utility in Worcester County, Maryland, and Ocean City utilize, and that has a couple aspects to it. It requires within Ocean City proper that as they repave streets, we put gas main under the streets and stubs to properties. It also allows for the utility to pay for the conversion of appliances in the homes. And Ocean City, as part of this effort, and Ocean City requested this approach for two different reasons. One, they wanted penetration to natural gas to occur more quickly. They were concerned about road impacts, and so they wanted it timed with their road work. But they also were concerned about coastal storms and the flooding associated with that, and the potential danger for floating fuel tanks, whether that's number 2 fuel oil or propane tanks, and the environmental issues and fire issues that come with that. So they also, by code, have disallowed new tank installations. And so those things coupled together have expanded natural gas through Ocean City at a pace faster than happens by a pure economic test. Now, that is accomplished by a line item on the bill throughout that footprint that essentially socializes the cost of that extension, right? And so it doesn't come for free, but Ocean City felt like the burden upon the existing ratepayers was supported by the benefit to the community and the opportunity of bringing natural gas to those that might not have been able to get it otherwise, right? So that, that's an avenue that we certainly are open to explore, with Lewis's explicit desire to do so, right? And then the mayor and I lastly talked about, whether if some council members want to explore that, or just our expansion and the means and approaches and the tests that we have to go through to do so, we'd be happy to sit down with somebody from the PSC and council members, whether it's a video conference or we're situation allows us to do it in person, to talk through these things. And I don't want it to be viewed as Lewis's desires versus Chesapeake, because our desires really are the same. Our success in picking up, towards 1,000 customers within the municipality, several thousand that surround the municipality, it greatly eclipsed the couple large customers that made the extension into your footprint possible. And residential customers make up the bulk of our customer base, right? So it is really very important for us. It's an interesting, real difference in view, where, again, we look at the footprint as being one of the successful footprints for us, and we understand that there's criticism that we're not expanding as fast as some would like us to, right? So with that, Mayor, if there's any other points you wanted me to hit upon, but I'm happy to take questions or hear some discussion. Or
Dean, I think that was a good overview, and I appreciate your taking time to do that. I know there are questions from members of council, and I would open it up. I know, Rob, you've had several questions. If you would like to go ahead, or you want to wait, that's fine.
I don't know how you knew I had several questions, Mayor.
I think we talked about it a little bit.
Well, I have. Mr. Holden, thanks for your presentation. You spoke tonight, and you spoke the last time about being bound by the tariff. And I know that's true.
Can you turn your mic up, Rob? You're losing most of your conversation.
I'll talk closer to the mic. Could you hear that, Mayor?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay. But isn't it the case that that Chesapeake itself drafted that tariff and filed it?
So Chesapeake works in concert, yes, and so the ultimate version of the tariff is arrived at through discussion with the Public Service Commission, the Public Advocate, and Chesapeake. And so you are correct that they're most often with tariff amendments, or an initial tariff is provided by the utility. The final tariff is approved by the Public Service Commission, almost always with notable edits that are impacted by the Public Advocate and the Public Service Commission staff themselves.
The tariff refers to an internal rate of return methodology that Chesapeake uses in order to calculate whether it is in its financial interest to make a line extension. And that internal rate of return methodology governs under the tariff whether you make a line extension, or whether you have to anyway. But that methodology is not made public. And so we have no way of looking behind your calculations and your formulas to see whether, in fact, they're being applied correctly. Is that something you're willing to disclose?
So I would not be the one to authorize that, sharing the spreadsheet, right? But what I would offer two different points. We have to submit to the Public Service Commission the model for every residential development that we extend to, right? So there's no hidden signs behind the curtain. And I would say that that might be an opportunity where we could sit down with yourself or other members of council and the Public Service Commission to review that methodology. I'm familiar with the model, but I'm not the one to authorize release of information like that. Second, I do believe that the model itself is something that likely is publicly available through the Public Service Commission, but let me confirm that and I will get that response back to you.
Well, I tried. I submitted FOIA requests and I didn't get it.
What was their response to you? Why did they not respond?
It was proprietary.
Okay. Understand. Well, I will have to dig a little more into that question to get you a fuller answer.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Mayor, that's what I have.
Okay, great, thank you. Anyone else care to have a question or? Yes.
I have a question. Mr. Holden, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask you about the description you offered about the expansion plan that was used down in, I believe you said Ocean City, in that region of Maryland. And what my question is, was that option created because the Maryland State Corporation Commission or the governing regulatory body for utilities encouraged your company to create those opportunities? Or is that something that you all actually created the initiative? I'd like to know, it's a chicken and the egg kind of question, but it needs to be answered.
Right, certainly. No, so that, Councilperson, so that it was done in concert with Chesapeake's interest to expand natural gas to customers and Ocean City's interest to do a couple different things. And it was tank safety that they were concerned about, extension to customers who did not have it, and minimizing impact to Ocean City works really hard to maintain nice roadways, right? And so they also didn't want us to come in after they had paved something. And so it was those drivers that we went in partnership to the Maryland Public Service Commission and asked for the ability to create that system improvement rate approach for expansion. It also, and it did one other thing, it also, our Sandpiper entity and Worcester County as a whole, not just Ocean City, was served by a private piped propane system, which we bought, but we wanted to convert that to natural gas. And so the add component of it was we, through that system improvement rate, are able to pay the upfront cost for conversion of propane customers over to natural gas. So that's it's a unique nuance to it, but again, it happened in partnership with Ocean City, Worcester County, and Chesapeake going to the Maryland Public Service Commission.
And how long ago was that accomplished in Maryland for those communities?
7 or 8 years, and it may be off, 1 or 2.
Sure. Okay.
But right in that area.
Right. And I guess where I'm coming from is during those 7 and 8 years, you have heard from the Lewis community about our desire for your company to expand more aggressively. And I take note of the fact that we're just hearing about this opportunity now. And I wish you had brought this to our attention 5 years ago, 6 years ago, so we could have already had that conversation with the regulators and that we would already be enjoying the benefits of those conversations.
So I've been in this interactive role with Lewis for maybe a little over 3 years. And I think the mayor could attest that we have been talking about this as a potential for several years. I don't know that we have spoke about it in front of council, but for the meeting we had 2 months ago. And so we've talked about some other methods. We have talked about with mayor and staff, do we look at increasing the franchise fees to allow Lewis to have a kitty to help on economic projects? Or, we've met with Public Works, Darren Gordon, a number of times to try to see where we might dovetail and coincide. And we have talked about, and several years ago, we provided the system improvement rate language that's in the Sandpiper tariff, which is our entity in Worcester County, to mayor and staff. And so it hasn't been a hidden secret, right? But my apologies that didn't get elevated and we didn't bring that discussion direct to you.
Well, of course, the other question that dovetails with what you've just said is we share in the desire to make sure that when we are upgrading our infrastructure, that is paving our streets and replacing sewer lines, water lines, and other utilities, that we take advantage of that disruption to put everything we can in the ground at that time. And I know factually I've asked about what about expansion of Chesapeake's facilities? Why are they not part of this discussion? Why are they not here on site? Where's their engineering? And I've been told repeatedly that you all have not been willing and able to provide engineering in a perspective way. That is, looking down the road 5 years from now, we hope to be at the corner of Savannah and Gills Neck Road. We hope to be in these other areas, and we need to just get pipe in the ground and use it later on, but get it in the ground now. Very much like what you described you did down in Ocean City and Sandpiper, or whatever it was called.
Dean, I do want to
Similar, and
I do want to comment. The first time you and I spoke about the idea of Ocean City banning more tanks was really just last week. So in detail. So I want to just make that clear to everyone that we really have not talked about the Ocean City ban of tanks until just recently. So other than that, I think the idea of us going back to, you're absolutely right, going back to the PSC for some kind of tariff, and we have talked about that, yes. Okay. Anyone else have comments or questions at this point? Yes, Bonnie.
I'm Mr. Holden. I think I more than beat up on you in September. I'm not going to do that again. I think I made my thoughts pretty clear on the lack of penetration in Lewis. I just want to clarify one thing. If I understood what you were talking about before, I think it was in Ocean City, that was basically I just want to make sure I understand the mechanics of it. That was a fee that was imposed on all customers to enable new customers not to have undesirable types of facilities. Is that, did I follow it correctly?
I think you're on point there. And so we call it the system improvement rate. And so for example, gas customers within Ocean City proper that are existing gas customers, there's a volumetric percentage that's calculated based upon the investment that's gone in to support those pieces that are done under the system improvement rate, AKA the conversions or pipe under roads right before they get paved. And so that's the mechanism through which the economies of supporting that for upfront capital investment are recovered. So essentially the current customers are footing the bill to put the pipe in to get to new customers, which we are specifically not allowed to do without a mechanism like that, right? Within Delaware, all new extensions have to be economic relative to the revenue expected from the new customers, right? So it's a mechanism that, and Ocean City, essentially said, the burden to our current gas customer residents is valid to impart upon them because of the benefit of a robust system, because of the benefit from the safety and of getting tanks out, the quality of our roadways, and the opportunity it's going to provide for people to connect to natural gas who might not be able to have done so otherwise.
Okay, just out of curiosity, the system improvement rate, which I guess is a function of or a part of the franchise fee, which is your volumetric fee, about how much did that run for your average customer in Ocean City?
It varies, and what I can do is send you, I will send to the mayor for you guys to see kind of a conceptual breakdown of a average residential customer bill. And I think that might be the best way to do that because I don't have the math in front of me today. But a customer's bill is generally made up of a few components. There's a meter charge, which occurs regardless of how much gas you use. And then there are some volumetric charges. There's ESR, which is the gas service rate, and that is a pass-through that we are not allowed to earn any money on, that provides for the commodity. We buy the gas, we get the gas to you, and the infrastructure necessary to get that gas to you. The DSR is the delivery service rate, right? And so that's our labor, our man hours, that's the return on the infrastructure we put in the ground. There's the franchise fee, which is a very small component to all this. And then in Worcester County and in Ocean City, they have an additional system improvement.
Okay,
rate,
so
right?
it's the meter charge plus the cost of the gas plus your return on investment plus a franchise fee plus a system improvement rate. Now, if I understood it correctly, so in the system improvement rate scenario, that also, if I understood it right, came with sort of a compulsory piece to it, because the governmental entities there said, we're not going to allow this kind of underground tank or whatever it was. And that sort of got you into this is all good for the community, and there, because we don't want these things anymore, and therefore we're going to impose this rate on everybody.
Yeah, their prohibition on
that there was an action. Just want to make sure I understood it, that there's an action by the local government that basically explained why everybody, all the existing customers would get this system improvement rate charge.
Partially, I think, right? And what was the compelling reason for the Public Service Commission? I cannot tell you, right? It was that the municipality asked for it. The municipality wanted to get gas to customers that wouldn't get it under a typical expansion in the time. They wanted to get infrastructure in under paving and not have paving impacts. And they were also concerned about the tanks. And so which one was the most important or the most compelling to the Public Service Commission? I'm not sure, right? Likely could have been approved without their prohibition on new tanks. I don't think anyone was the linchpin to get that approval at the Public Service Commission level, but it was a strong motivator from the municipality. They felt very strongly at that, and they had a history of issues from flooding events that was a strong memory and driver for them to support the effort.
Okay, if you could provide the information you offered about, so we have some idea of what this actually works out to. Obviously, you're going to have different scale, I would think, because within Lewis or within the ecosystem of Chesapeake in this area, you're only going to have X number of customers who would be assessed.
Certainly, I'd be happy to, and to give you a sense, and it would be, it's different in Worcester County also because there were about 10,000 customers in that piped propane system.
Exactly.
We have now converted, and all of that capital cost is inclusive in that SIR rate in addition to the main extension. So the rate wouldn't be a synonymous rate for if we approach this in Lewis, but it'll give you a sense for scale for where they are. And then I would offer also, you could envision a tariff provision like the SIR in a municipality with caps of any sort, right? It could be no more than 2 miles of main a year, or no more than X% impact to a customer bill, right? There are a lot of ways that Public Service Commissions throttle the potential impact to the consumer that could be envisioned. So it does not have to be a free-for-all or an unknown burden that could go sky high. You can limit those things in a lot of different ways, which is a very valid consideration if you jump into looking at a system like that or a rate structure like that.
Okay, thank you.
Dean, this is very helpful information. Thank you very much. I see we have a question from Doug Spellman in Canary Creek. He was asking, and I think you've already explored this, but let's raise it again. The Canary Creek community has 102 homes serviced by a central gas field, piped to natural gas specifications. Are you interested in working with our propane company to explore making natural gas available to our community. It has been a while since we discussed this. I know it was discussed.
Certainly, and so this is one that we deal with often. We absolutely would be interested, but we have to be very cautious when a private company owns a propane gas system in a community, that we can only enter into a discussion if the community and the propane provider come to us jointly, right? And the potential there for legal folks is tortious infringement, right? If we are the wedge between contracted parties. And so if the propane provider and the community are interested, we certainly are open to that conversation.
Thank you for that point of clarification. All right.
Did you see Charlie's comment in there too?
Yeah, I think Charlie, I think Dean already kind of answered it. It was as a collection of the system improvement rate allowed for natural gas pipe installation in all or almost all of Ocean City. And it sounds to me like you answered that pretty affirmatively.
Yes, that almost all. We've got a few streets as we go north to finish that are expected in, I think, the next about year and a half. But the expansion of pipe through Ocean City has really been a neat thing to see. In addition to, we drilled under the Isle of Wight to bring natural gas service across to Ocean City proper, and then have converted 10,000 or so customers within it. So we're very proud of that accomplishment. But it also has provided natural gas along a lot of streets that have immediately very few customers. And what we see is as people's hot water heater goes bad or other, we pick those customers up over time.
Yeah. I know that your system here in the Lewis area, in the metropolitan area of Lewis, or the greater area of Lewis, has included a lot of areas that are not within the corporate limits. So if we were to entertain an SIR rate, we would only be able to affect that on homes or residents who were within the city limits. So have you done anything with Sussex County along this line?
We have not had any deep discussions there with Sussex County. Now we haven't been, challenged to expand faster either, right? And so it's a tool akin to, looking at an expansion of a franchise fee, which at the end of the day would be a legal question for Lewis to look at what the charter would allow that and allow franchise fee money to be used that way. But the SIR is not one that has come up real often. So not at the county during my tenure.
Okay, I would think the county would, because of the size of the county, I think that would be a very difficult thing to get identified.
Right, and there's the growth within Sussex County, as you all know, is a very fast-paced rate, and so we have had good success in being able to serve those areas of dense growth. Now we have worked with Sussex County. Sussex County paid up front to put gas through their industrial park, now the Coastal Business Park, right? As there were no customers yet, but they also knew that having natural gas was a critical piece of bringing the customers in that they wanted. So we partner with them on projects often, but have not got into the types of discussions that we've had with us.
I think one of the takeaways from our conversation this afternoon was that you have recently sent out a survey question to the folks on Franklin, and you're awaiting response. It's only been out about a week, but so far you've only had one response. So it's very important that people do respond to those surveys when they get them. And I know we're looking at possibly resending one to Mulberry Market, Chestnut, and Ship Carpenter or Park Avenue. Because that one has had 0 responses so far, or very few, 12%, I guess, is what has responded in something that's been out since March. So I think our citizens' response rate needs to, in order for you to really understand where we're going, you need a better response rate from citizens.
This is true. And one other, I know we have talked about it before, but I'm not sure if we had in front of council overall. We also at times, like at the Sussex County Coastal Business Park, the county paid up front. As customers come online, the county gets to recoup costs paid up front, right, as those revenues come online. And so that's a mechanism that is open to some of our larger, we do that sometimes with large corporations when there's a large cost to get gas to them. But if we think we're going to be able to connect other folks, right, and so that's another method. Now it requires, the liability of putting an entity's money up front, hoping that the growth is going to occur. But that's a tool that we use, and we're certainly open to use as Lewis might be interested.
Are there any other questions or comments from council?
I had a comment. I guess a question. Dean, do you have other ways of collecting that interest beyond a survey? For instance, is there a mechanism to go on Chesapeake's site and people to register their address? Or could such a portal be created and then they're not dependent on someone responding to a survey that comes to them once a year, but rather they can go proactively to a site, put in their information, and then we can collect that and see how many people in this general area have responded that they are interested in natural gas and understand the costs of potentially installing it. Do you have such a portal?
So there are some portals on the site, and so in addition to the other information pieces that we've talked about, I will send those to Anne Marie and the mayor, so you guys can see those. We also, we mentioned, in 2016 partnered and canvassed all property owners within the municipality, right? And we record those, maintain those records in our GIS system. And so we talk about it in terms of connecting the dots, right? But we look for sufficient green dots that we think we can get a new line installed and pick up those customers. So all of the surveys, the interested parties, folks that just happen to call in and get to our gas reps, get recorded in our GIS system, so that as we move forward and maybe we get close enough now that it's a viable project to get to them, and we can call them back and say, hey, we're right around the corner now, are you still interested? So we do look at interest in that fashion, but I'll include links for those portals for sharing amongst council.
Okay. Thank you. I think if you could get that information to us and the other information regarding the SIR and what's going on in Ocean City, how that tariff breaks down, we'll be better able to figure out a path forward to work with you and the PSC to try and get the answers to some of these questions ironed out well in advance of when the renewal date is for this franchise agreement and how we would go forward from there. Rob, do you have a comment?
May I speak to that?
Please.
I think in 10 months, the 10-year anniversary comes up.
Correct.
And for early termination under section 14 of our agreement, we need to give Chesapeake 12 months notice. So actually we're 2 months late in taking advantage of the full extent of that right. And of course, it'll take a while for our thinking to mature. So I wonder, would it make sense, Mayor, to, not tonight, but soon, to think about gathering together a subset of us, perhaps with some other interested citizens, to begin to study whether we should take advantage of that early termination option, and particularly invite the Board of Public Works to be part of those talks.
Absolutely. I was thinking along the same lines, Rob.
Great.
So I would think certainly by our January meeting, by assuming Dean could get us the information in the ensuing period, we should be able to make that happen.
Great.
Okay. Does that sound reasonable to you, Dean?
Certainly.
Okay, great. If there are no further discussion, I thank you very much for taking your time to be here this evening, and we'll look forward to getting that information and be back in touch. Okay?
Thank you. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're now finally ready to move on to the merge wayfinding discussion. Anne Marie, if you could help.
Yes, so I am making John and Jessica panelists.
Okay.
And then Jessica's going to share her screen.
Hello, this is Jess.
Hello.
Hello. We're hearing Jess.
John's here. I'm sorry.
Okay, John. John, you're a little faint. Maybe you're a little far from your microphone. If you could.
I'll get a little bit closer.
That's great. Thank you.
Better. You
Yes.
can also. Great. Thank you all for having us here tonight on the wayfinding program. I think some of you have seen pieces of this as we've moved through it. We're still at the sort of schematic design phase of it. We've done some preliminary programming of where assigned locations so we can start to get some quantities, and we're going to start out with talk a little bit about the wayfinding analysis. What we're looking to do tonight is we have 3 schematic design options. We want to get your comments. We're looking to get sort of a basis for design as we move forward, and we'll eventually come back to you with a final design option based on the comments, as well as budgets and a phasing plan on how to move forward with everything. So, we had a kickoff meeting last year. We have been working through the wayfinding analysis and schematic design through April. We did a survey monkey to get public feedback. We've made some edits to that. And then we also presented to the City Parking Committee in October, made a couple more edits, but we still have the 3 design options that we're presenting to you today as we get to that point, and Jess will sort of go through that. So it's just as a reminder, this project started from a contract we had with Sussex County Tourism and Scott Thomas and his group to look at the Route 1 signage. And when we did that, one of the things we brought up was that while we were sort of limited to larger signs out on Route 1, we had the idea that that could then extend into both Lewis and Rehoboth Beach as unique systems, but all sort of tie together in a way that would feel more regional. As you might have noticed, in Rehoboth this summer, a lot of the signs started to go up. But we went through the same exact process that we're doing with you, that we did with them, as far as design and then budgeting and implementation. So, that gave us a framework to work within. So as we go through design, we have tried to make it specific to Lewis, but there is sort of a framework that we've used for certain sign types. And we've shown this picture before of all the different wayfinding signs that are out there. Really, we're trying to cut down on the visual clutter, co-locate information, and really clean up a lot of the signage that's out there and get it updated. Our wayfinding analysis, we did look at all kinds of wayfinding, so we're not just signage, although that is what we're going to concentrate on tonight, but we put an analysis together that also looked at digital wayfinding, printed maps, how landmarks help you find your way. But tonight we're really going to look at the signage component of what we have done. Jess will talk a little bit about the wayfinding analysis, but I always describe it as think about a big picture in. You arrive at Lewis, you may get direct to a district like the historic district, you park your car, and then you become a pedestrian. So that's how we sort of thought about each of the components to the project.
So we looked in the analysis at different ways that people arrive to the city of Lewis. So we have, we've identified primary gateways into the city, as well as a secondary gateway on New Road. And then there's also trail entry points to the city where people might arrive to the city via trails on bike or walking in. So we wanted to make sure that we looked at those as well. I think one thing important to remember is that we do have the ferry as an access point to the city. So we want to make sure that we're looking at putting some sort of gateway and welcome element there as well. John talked a little bit about directing to districts. This came out of the study that we did for the Route 1 project in a way to lower the clutter of having so many destinations in the historic district. Rather than directing to all of them from Route 1, we're going to direct to the historic district. And then once you're closer to there, we'll peel off to the different destinations. And the same will go for the attractions along the canal and to the beaches as well.
It's a very common wayfinding approach to creating districts and then organizing the information that way.
So then we started to look at where clusters of destinations in the city were starting to gather. And we have our destination list that we worked with the steering committee to create. These would be things that we would be signing to on vehicular signs. Anything that's in blue is still up for discussion. There's been a lot of talk about if the parking lots need to be named or renamed, so that's still kind of being discussed. But you can see here that we have all of the districts located and attractions. We were also told one of the feedback items that we received was that for future use, there's a water taxi service that will be coming online soon. So we wanted just to be aware of that for future signage. And then we got really into looking at the parking throughout the city. The city has a lot of parking lots, but the signage is not very, it's not large enough for one thing. I think we want to make sure that people know the benefits that the parking is free. There's a lot of parking in Lewis, but a lot of the lots are underutilized. So the analysis goes a little bit more into guiding people to those lots and making sure that there's information available at them. We also looked at the use of bicycles and all the trails that kind of come together and connect in the city. So we want to make sure that we're directing pedestrians and cyclists around the city and on the trails. It was also brought to our attention to address the fact that the historic Lewis byway goes through the town. So we want to make sure that we are aware of the roads where the byway is going through the town, and you'll see in the schematic design options some ways that we've thought to incorporate that marker into that identity into some of the vehicular signs, so that there won't be as many, that we can maybe have the identity on the sign, a vehicular sign itself, rather than a separate panel. So then we'll get into the 3 schematic designs that we have. So again, just remembering that this originated from the Route 1 signage, and the idea was to have some sort of tie back to that signage, either through color or through just the use of some sort of enhancement marker, maybe this wave shape, the blue wave shape at the top. So for our first option, we looked at a system, and we're just showing, again, a sampling of the signs that would be utilized throughout the city for each of these options, just to get an overall design aesthetic established. So there's a couple different sign types here that we'll see. If we start at the left, these would be vehicular signs. We're utilizing a dark pole. If you remember the Rehoboth system, we went with a light gray pole there because it matched the other elements that were in their streetscape, but that would not be appropriate for Lewis. So we went with a darker pole and some metallic painted accents on some of these signs at the bottom of these sign panels. There's a decorative collar at the top of, if you want to move to the next slide, John. There's a decorative collar at the top of these signs. And this is an example of how we might bring in the historic Lewis byway ID into the bottom of vehicular signs that are located along the byway. The shape of this first option, the panel shape itself, is drawn from the park signage system in the city of Lewis, which is a really nice and very consistent and well-established system throughout of the park signs. So we thought that we could build on that for a consistent look throughout the city. And then that shape is carried through into parking signs, both directing you to parking, directing you to special kinds of parking, whether it be for electrical charging devices, and using a really clear parking P icon that is that's going to guide you throughout the city, to sort of give you little breadcrumbs to follow, and then carrying that through into a parking arrival sign that again has that consistent identity and allows you to know that it is free public parking. And then also some pedestrian elements like kiosks we're starting to think about too. But all of these carry through a color palette that relates to the color palette that was seen on the Route 1 signage, but it definitely has a little bit more of a historic feel to it with the metallic accents and the darker blue color palette. Option 2, we went with a slightly more modern approach here for the panel shape. This relates a little more directly to the signs out on Route 1 with the wave shape at the top. This panel blue also matches the exact blue that would be on the Route 1 signs. It's also what Rehoboth went with, but we make it unique to Lewis with these little metal painted collar accents at the bottom and at the top of the post itself. And we have the cutout representing the Lewis Lighthouse at the top of the panel. So here again, you can see the metallic accents on the panel. And these are just a metallic paint. It's not like we're putting a actual bronze or brass accent on here. The cutout at the top of the panel, you can see the wave shape that is the consistent element from the Route 1 and how we might identify the byway. And then again, we see some parking signs. These are a little bit more simple, just with the rectangular shape. We did bring in a finial for some of these single post signs that match some of the finials that we saw in the city. The bases for the parking arrival signs and the kiosk design for this element bring in a brick facade, a brick base that would just sort of relates more to the historic downtown, the historic district feel. And the final option, we went back to the shape that is utilized from the park signage system, but have it framed on top and bottom with the metallic paint accent, and we brought back the sort of simple rectangle blue shape that relates to the Route 1 system. And we moved the byway ID to the top of the panel here, and this system also utilizes a finial for the vehicular signs as well, which was not on the first option. And again here, parking signs, sort of a different parking arrival sign that's more of a flag sign. All of these options utilize a slightly different parking key identity as well, whether it be a different color or a slightly different font. And then this kiosk is sort of an option for a larger type of kiosk. It actually has a bench incorporated into it and a small roof. The kiosks would all be double-sided. This is where you could promote event information and all sorts of shopping and dining that go on in the city, as well as orientation maps and wayfinding information. So when considering looking at those three options, things to kind of look at between the three options are variations in the sign panel shapes or cutout at the top, the different sorts of pole collar, whether it be something metallic or something that matches the dark color of the pole, if there are any types of base materials used, such as brick, or if it's something that's more just post and panel.
And I think, and I'll zoom in on some of these because it's a little bit difficult to see, but we were having discussion as to which one might be more expensive than others. I think whenever you look at these and you start to bring, I think in general, they're sort of all in the same world of cost, but when you start to look at brick bases and bringing those kind of elements, that elevates the cost a little bit. We may even, as we get into it, we could have a version of those that have a brick base and some that don't. We'll look at that. But that's sort of the main difference between most of them, because they all are utilizing sort of more traditional historic and decorative base on all the poles. So I don't know that there's a huge cost other than the brick.
I just wanted to say one thing about the sign menus. They all have a bike sign in the middle, a trail sign. This is a sign that that you might have saw, or that we had a photo of, that has gone up in Rehoboth for the for the trails that connect the entire region, the Junction and Breakwater Trail. And so we would like the signs for the trails to be consistent. The ones that went up in Rehoboth are signing to Lewis, and the ones that would go up around Lewis would sign back to Rehoboth Beach,
Thank you.
among other destinations.
Among other destinations, for sure.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about this, and you've been working this, and I know the Downtown Parking Committee saw this a couple weeks ago. And I think Betsy Reamer's on as well. And Betsy, you've been part of this process. Maybe you have comments about this before we go to council, or do you want to wait? Anne Marie, are you elevating?
I'm trying. Yeah, I'm trying.
Okay.
Okay, so Betsy's unmuted. I did at the parking committee meeting asked if people could share if they had a preferred option, and the feedback I got, while I didn't hear from everybody, was really option 2, which is the lighthouse, seemed to be the preferred option. Now, of course, that has the brick bases. I think if we wanted to do that without the brick bases to deal with costs, Jessica, we could probably do that, I'm assuming.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. We're still at a point where we're looking to see feedback, what you like and don't like, and we can
Right.
definitely.
Okay.
Designs aren't that, because of what Lewis is and how we're working within a framework, the designs are not that far apart.
Right.
So there is some mixing and matching that can go here. We're looking to get sort of if this is the basis for design without the brick, but maybe you like the identity of the P popping, that's fine. And we can bring that sort of thing into it.
So Betsy's unmuted. If she wants to.
Betsy, do you have any comment you'd like to make at this point?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I would just like to support the idea that the sign clutter in Lewis is very confusing for our visitors and our new residents, and we have lots of new residents coming into the area. And I like the fact that there's consistency here, and that was the whole idea when Sussex County developed this program, that there would be a consistency. Then when people come in on Route 1, that the signage that they see coming in on Route 1, which hasn't been developed yet, but it would be consistent with when they came into Lewis and when they came into Rehoboth. And I think that what they've come up with will really reduce the sign clutter and make it much more accessible for everyone.
Thank you. Members of council, would you like to comment on this? Anyone going to go first?
I'll go. I just wonder if John and Jessica, if you could comment the challenges that you see in your industry competing with GPS as a modern wayfinding in terms of not relying on signage in a modern world and relying on the sort of monotone voice of our GPS system and taking us to and from where we're looking to go.
Sure. So, it all works together. It's all one system. So the GPS is not just the end all solution to helping people find their way. If you think about from the vehicular standpoint, or even just a pedestrian standpoint of letting people discover things that they may not be looking for and they don't realize that it's that close. The directional signs will do that. Also, as you're driving, especially with the parking, having that identity of when you're looking around and being able to identify that first is very helpful. They really work in concert. It's not one should replace the other as you look at it. But we also are talking about gateway elements and other things that, the bicycle signage, all of that is part of this. So it's not just like the GPS is going to solve everything. So we think there's multiple layers in here to help somebody find their way.
And the question around that, the biking piece is, do we know, Mayor, as what our authority would even be in terms of placing these signs along bike trails?
I think that would be coordinated with DelDOT. We'd have to coordinate if we're going to place them on the trail. If we're placing directional signs in the city right of way, we could place them. But if we're going to place them on the trail, we'd have to get coordination with DelDOT.
Right, I think we could, on the parts that we maintain, while we might, obviously, we'd still coordinate with DelDOT. If we were gonna put them on the parts of the Georgetown to Lewis Trail that is maintained by DelDOT, we would need to work very closely with them. And then the Junction and Breakwater Trail is entirely DENREX. So we would want to make sure that we coordinate with those agencies.
I guess my concern in general is just we're kind of picking out our design preferences and sort of where, how many signs, et cetera, before we've kind of established a budget. We know what Rehoboth paid for this, but to what extent are we willing to, how much are we willing to invest? So, I guess that's a larger point is before we kind of pick out the curtains, are we going to buy the house?
Right. So part of what we're doing now is we start to put together a preliminary budget, and we now have sort of the quantity of signs, so we can start to apply the design cost of what you see. And again, other than the brick, they're all relatively in the same area, to get a budget and then also put together a phasing plan so that you can decide priority-wise. In Rehoboth, we gave them an order of magnitude and said, you could do all of it or you could do a piece of it. And they decided to do all of it at first, but they could have separated that out and said, okay, because they were very big on parking. That was sort of their priority. They could have said, we are already going to do parking this year and we'll do gateways down the road. They just decided to, because of the cost, they were able to do all of it. I did a preliminary budget this afternoon, expecting that I would get that question. Is Rehoboth's budget was $285. The bids came in at $235. The budget I came up with for Lewis is about $320. You have a couple more parking lots, and you have some gateway signs, and you have some larger vehicular signs that might be necessary. Again, we're going to break that down for you so you can decide what to do. Some of that are gateway elements, you have additional gateways. So you'll be able to break that down and decide what to do based on that.
Yeah, I think phasing would be the way for this community, probably. That's a very significant capital expenditure for us in one season.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Other members of council have comments?
Mayor, I have a couple of questions.
Okay, Rob.
Mr. Bozier, you talked about the budget for the initial acquisition. Do you have experience? I mean, I know you don't install these things, but do you have experience with how long they last, both the poles and the paint and the signs themselves?
Sure. So the different materials, you'll get different warranties. The vinyl, you will get a 7 to 10 year warranty on the vinyl. The paint is around 8 to 10 years as well. What we see consistently is that after about 5 years, you go back and you start to reevaluate the messaging to see if things move. But the signs themselves should last 15 years. Even though those warranties are less, that just means that's just the warranty, the actual length of material. As they're upkept, they're 15 years. One of the things that we're actually proud of is we have clients who've come back to us 8, 10, 12 years later to look at their system. There's just that look at usually is inclusive of just things that have moved around, but not the design. So they've maintained the design even on a longer period of time because it's fitting into the environment. The changes are more operational based on circulation. But the materials themselves, you should get 15 years, even 20 to 25 years sometimes out of some systems. I think based on where you're located, you're going to be, with the climate and the air, you're probably going to be in that 15-year range.
Thank you. That's very useful. Then I had another question for you or Ms. Church. A couple of people, I mean, Andrew and Betsy, and I think Ms. Church, you yourself mentioned clutter. And it strikes me that in a way, we've given you an impossible task. Design a set of signs that conveys information, which means make them large, make them frequent, but reduce clutter.
Mhm.
And Andrew had a very interesting idea about taking advantage of technology. I've got a less interesting idea. It's also would use technology. Have you any experience with signs that are electric that can fade from one message to another and convey information that's more than you could fit on a single sign? In a crude way, that's what the ferry terminal does. They have a sign that changes within the amount of time that you approach it, so you can get the whole message.
Mhm.
Is that something that you have any experience with?
Yeah, we do it mostly for the sign types that are this kiosk sign type where we have digital components, where it could even be interactive and you can drill down deeper into information. Cost-wise, you would not be able to do vehicular signs or something of that quantity. You really sort of keep it at the kiosk level. You have to, there's questions regarding city policies and advertising and those kind of things that you may run into when you're doing it for that. But from a cost standpoint, you can't do it for these.
What about the gateway signs?
You could do a digital message on the gateway, sure. Again, is it appropriate for Lewis? Is it allowed in Lewis? They're all questions you would have to start to ask before you can get into it.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions I'd like to ask.
Hey, Tim, go ahead.
Thank you. Do I understand, well, would someone please explain what the county's commitment is to the plan? Have they pulled away from it or are they going forward?
Yeah, so I talked to Scott not that long ago, and he said he was this close to getting funding for it, and then the pandemic hit. So I'm not sure where they stand. I know it's something that is still on their plate that they want to do, but financially, they were close, but it's not funded at the moment. I can check back in with him and find out if he has any more opportunities, but they were close, but just didn't come through at the moment.
I see. And so they had already made their design selections, is that correct? And if they were that close in the budgeting, they were that close to?
They had settled on a design. We had given them budgets for the implementation of it. Their sign types are much different in the sense of the size and the scale of what has to happen out there compared to, your small historic district.
Okay.
Our recommendation always was just that, when you do wayfinding and you phase it in, you always work from the inside out anyway. So we would have done Route 1 first and, directed people off and then let them go. That's not the best way to do it. So, that Rehoboth did it and you're thinking of doing it and working out is, a manageable way of doing it.
I see. Okay. Getting back to the question, picking up on the question that Rob Morgan asked, and this has to do with the maintenance of these signs.
Mm-hmm.
I think you suggested that we could expect a useful life of around 15 years, at which time then we could expect that they would need to be painted or some freshening up, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
Who does that? Who does the freshening up? Is that a service that we hire Merge to do, or is that something that our own street department people do?
Right. It's not something that we do. We're just designers and planners, so we don't fabricate or install. You have the option of, as you go through this process, of contracting out with whoever built the signs to do a maintenance plan and that on an annual basis, or some cities will do it in-house through their public works.
I see. I'm so glad you answered that question that way. So I think I did not understand before that you were doing design only. So you have no piece of the manufacturing of these signs, correct?
I'm trying to do this with the least amount of signs, not the most amount of signs.
Right. So no, my point for mentioning that is that then once the design work is done, then we would acquire those designs from you. They become proprietary, and then we would go to the market, so to speak, go to local sign companies and have them manufactured to the specifications. Is that correct?
That is correct. So you'll
I
have.
see.
So our contract is to give you, once we settle on all of this, we'll give you bid documents, and you will decide to bid out all of it or some of it, depending on what your funding will be.
Right.
You can also, just from a maintenance standpoint, I believe that Rehoboth also ordered attic stock. So they bought some extra poles, they bought some extra things so that when it does get hit, they have some parts in hand.
Sure.
Ready to go.
And that kind of hardware, the poles and those and so forth, is that something that they are buying through their sign vendor or from some other vendor, or is that coming through? That's not coming through you either, your shop either, right?
No, it comes all through the contractor that they hire.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Huh.
The
So
posts that you've
my
designed for
understanding,
this-
John, is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. What are you going to say, Anne Marie?
My understanding, John, is that you would prepare the bid specifications. We would put it out to bid, and all of the materials would come from the successful bidder.
Yeah, and they would, and what they hire, their low bid came from a company in South Carolina, and that company then hired a sign company in Dover to install them. They were still involved, but the Dover company was the one who did all the excavation and got all the signs in the ground.
And so the estimate that you prepared, John, that you've ballparked for Lewis, that is does that include the design fees that your firm would receive? No, that's separate?
That's, yeah, the number I just gave you was totally fabrication and installation.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Thank you.
The bases that you have designed on these posts at this point, the metal ones, are consistent with the lamp post bases that we have all over 2nd Street and other sign bases that we're currently using. Some of those may be recyclable. If we go to this kind of a signage, some of the bases that have currently just street signs on them might be able to be recycled.
Right.
But that's something down the road.
We also specified in Rehoboth, and we got it from a project we did for San Diego, marine grade powder coating paint, which is, that adds to the cost too a little bit.
Yeah, but also helps with the durability.
Yeah, I mean, we understand that's a big deal.
Yeah.
John, one of the other issues that we are considering actually this evening and is on the plate for the city is the business of 5G telecommunications and small cell specifically. And of course, that requires posts or poles. And do you have any experience of your poles being adapted to that kind of application?
We've been asked that before, but we don't have experience that they actually went through with it.
I see.
I think the height of these would make it impractical. They can answer that question. We have Verizon, and who will come up later, but that would
be. Yeah.
So we've got a question in the chat.
We actually had two.
Right. So there's one that says that option 2 has a neat character for Lewis. And then one is whether there would be QR code labels that could be used in conjunction with directing people to the Chamber website, Historical Society.
Sure. So yeah, the QR code, we've done that on other projects, especially on the information kiosks, and then it can just take you to a website. It's actually a very good way if you're already maintaining a website with business names and attractions and those sort of things. You can just scan it in and then go right to that website and get the information onto your phone. So it's interacting with it both ways. Less need of you having to update the panel itself.
Okay.
Anne Marie, I assume that our current signs have a cost. Is there any way to figure out what our annual run rate for sign installation and maintenance is, so that we know how to compare that to what we're being asked to budget.
Well, so a lot of the signs that are out there are not signs that are maintained by the city. So things like parking obviously are maintained by the city, but when you look at the slide that shows some of the sign clutter, those are not signs that the city maintains. So,
What would we do about those in this?
pardon?
What would we do about those in this plan?
They come down. All this comes down. So we're not, so I think that's an important thing important point to make, is that we're not adding to.
Do we have the authority to take down the ferry boats?
Well, some of them, I mean, some of these overheads, they won't come down. But when you're talking about all these little signs like here, all of those come down, and we're replacing that with a consistent system. We are not trying to add to what's out there. That would just make it worse. We're trying to do something that's more comprehensive.
So then we would take over the cost of the signs, that some of which are now erected and maintained by others.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say maintained by others. They're erected and they live there.
Yeah, you can use the number we give clients is 10 to 15% of your construction costs will go towards maintenance. So if you spent $250,000 a year, or I'm sorry, $250,000 for the system, $25,000 a year might go towards maintenance. Signs are going to get hit. A destination may move. That percentage sort of shifts in a lot of different places, but that's a reasonable number to think about to have as a maintenance budget.
Thank you.
There is a question about QR codes, possible revenue source. Are you aware of anybody who's choosing a QR code as a revenue source, John?
No, not specifically to the projects that we're doing. That would be up to you as to how you might generate revenue through them.
Right.
What you're connecting to. I mean,
that might be hard to track.
Yeah, what kind of business model you're trying to obtain or revenue trying to obtain from it.
Okay.
John, around that idea of metrics, are there metrics that you all use as success in measuring ROI?
Sure. So we typically use visitation is a very good one to use to see if visitation goes up at a destination. What we have found is that secondary destinations tend to see the greatest benefit from these kind of systems, and you have lots of secondary destinations. In comparison, if you were doing a large city that had an arena or a huge art museum, they have so many different sources of how they bring people in with shows and advertising that it's hard to judge them. But secondary destinations really rely on the signage for somebody to notice it and go, oh, I didn't realize that was that close. I should go visit it.
And are you capturing that anecdotally from, again, what's the sort of metric that someone's self-reporting that they found because of the sign?
Yeah, so we do it with some of the smaller destinations. It's harder to do it with things like parks and say, because some of the things we direct to also are like city halls and libraries that don't necessarily keep visitation. We have done surveys before and after where it's more customer experience surveys. So we have seen in Arkansas, we saw a bedroom community or a weekend sort of tourist attraction community where the customer experience showed us that they improved from 38% to 68% as to what the signage sort of helps people find and they stay longer. So they're the kind of metrics that we use. It's not there's not a silver bullet. I always tell people that, you put up this many signs and you're going to generate this much revenue and this many visitors are going to increase. It is sort of anecdotal, but there does seem to be an increase in both visitation and satisfaction.
Thanks, John.
Connie, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I do. First of all, thank you for the presentation. In a period when we are in economic uncertainty because of COVID, I fear that we will make the same decision or should make the same decision as the county in terms of whether this is a cost that it is appropriate to take on at this point, no matter how useful some of this may be. Or if we do put in some, maybe we should put in some parking signs, but that's about it, I think. The other question I have is we had one person in the chat offered their thoughts on which of the designs was the most appropriate. I really do think we should schedule a workshop to give the citizens more information about this. And
We've done that around 3 times. We've had like 3 different times that they've presented.
I know they've presented at least twice to the parking committee. I'm talking about something that's a standalone for people to be able to focus on this.
Well, so when one of the presentations, we put it out publicly and invited all of the committees that have any hand in it. So I don't remember who all attended, but.
Well, I'm not actually focusing on the committees right now, Anne Marie. I'm focusing on the citizens. And I think that would be an appropriate thing to do, particularly given the fact that a lot of organizations' signs will, their unique signs, whether they're in good shape or not, will come down through this. And I do think, particularly with the design alternatives, that it's something that the people should have a chance to come in and take a look at.
We also did a public survey to get, we didn't get great quantity on it, but it was out there along with the public.
You did a Survey Monkey, right?
Yes.
Yeah, those are not especially reliable or inviting in my experience anyway. So, that's just my opinion. Particularly if you're talking about, now we're up to, what was the number? $325,000 for this undertaking. I think that's of a sufficient size and design change, particularly when coupled with the design issues that we're talking about with the 5G, that it's appropriate to put it before the citizens. Now, that's difficult to do, obviously, in COVID time, but I think it would be appropriate. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, that is a possibility, although I do think I agree with Anne Marie. We've had this out here for some time, and I understand attendance has been spotty. One of the things we could do is we could post these 3 design options on the website and ask for people to comment.
Well, and get it in the paper too, and
Right.
make sure the comment periods are long enough out there that you get through the holidays and all the rest of it so people can focus.
That's an option. Given the fact we're, obviously Zoom meeting, I'm not sure you're going to get much more participation than what we're getting here tonight. We have, 39 people.
I don't know, Ted. I mean, we do workshops, public hearings on a lot of things. I think this one's significant enough that we should.
I might go a little further than Bonnie. I think that one of the things I'd like to hear about from the public is whether they think $250,000 and building in a $32,000 annual budget amount for maintenance is a good investment at this point.
Yeah, I think you have to be real careful. When I give you that number, I'm giving you an order of magnitude of everything you could possibly do. Ultimately, when I give you it as a phased plan, which is what we're trying to move towards, is that it's going to break it down into groups of elements that you can decide to do one of them, which may only be $15,000. You may decide to do another one that's $25,000, and it builds from there. And you as a group will make that decision as to how much you want to spend and what's appropriate. So to just sort of throw out the total number is a little bit sort of not fair to the whole project, because you may not decide to do the whole project. We understand that you may not want to do the entire thing. So we will give it to you in groups so you can make those priorities and maybe spend half of that. And that'll be up to you. So I wouldn't want to throw it all out just because you hear this one number when you don't have to do that whole number. You might do half of it or even a quarter of it. And
Yeah, well, that's actually very helpful, but it simply reinforces my view that if we're now talking about splitting this up into pieces, which pieces to do should be something the community further participates in.
Yeah, we're just at this point, we're just trying, and we've been trying to for quite some time, get to a basis to get past having 3 design options and getting to a basis for design through all these different workshops. And we were hoping to come out of tonight with at least some comments on some of the designs so that we can narrow it down and then give you a real plan as to that total cost and the individual phases that you can then take out and make some decisions with.
But didn't you say these are all these? I just want to make sure I understood this. That all these options, with the exception of the brick bases, that all the assumption that all of these 3 options basically cost the same.
Yeah, from a cost standpoint, they're all generally in the same area. Yeah, but we're trying to narrow down the design so that we can sort of present a unified plan across with the phasing.
Okay. All right. I think, what is your preference? Do we want to try and have a public workshop? Do we want to try to put it up on the website? Do we want to try and make a decision yet this evening? I'm hearing mixed comments here. I understand the cost, and I think John's tried to explain that there are, we could fractionalize this into components as we go along. Obviously, from the downtown parking committee, we know that parking is a significant issue that needs to be identified and needs to be addressed. The placement of parking signs and identification of parking, where parking is located, is going to be something we really should try to get done in some way as a priority.
I kind of echo what, Bonnie, it sounds like Rob has said. I think maybe if we're able to have a public meeting where maybe there are a low, medium, and high option, so that we kind of have an idea of what we're potentially taking on. And then it doesn't sound like they're doing the fabrication anyway, so it's really a design, and then the real time lag in my mind is what the fabrication piece, correct? I mean, these are being spat out of a CAD machine, I would assume.
Right.
The real option is, yeah, I mean, and John's giving you estimates. Obviously, he said that he originally had come in with a much higher estimate for Rehoboth. It came in lower. Who knows? And obviously, Rehoboth, it came in, according to what he said, it came in $50,000 lower than what he had originally estimated. That's, we haven't seen that happen to many of the projects we've tried to take it on recently. But that's a nice idea, that it might come in lower than his original estimate. But if we were to prioritize with parking being the one thing that we really needed to accomplish here, and then take on some of the other ideas, we could maybe accomplish this over a period of a few years and get it done in a way that would be less cost prohibitive.
I think what you're trying to do is come out of this with a plan, and then, as necessary, you can start to implement it.
Right.
Sounds as though maybe Andrew's low option might be parking only.
I think that parking is the biggest issue that we hear about all the time.
And that's what really spurred this.
And actually, those of us who participated, Bonnie, you'll recall, Nancy Stacy did a fantastic job of showing us just how bad our identification of parking is in downtown area or throughout the city. So I do think it would be the #1 priority issue. And I think John identified that it turned out it was the #1 issue for Rehoboth at the time that they approved their funding. Is that right, John?
Yeah, I mean, they had the same issue. It's in both cases, the project started with the idea that we need to get people to parking. And then the other things were just sort of added on to that based on what they wanted to do. But parking there was always #1 concern.
Okay.
Emery, did you say, was there a general consensus that #2 was the most desired option?
Well, so we got the one
Of
comment
those.
on the chat tonight, and then the two people from the parking committee who responded to me preferred number 2, but I mean, that's 3 people.
That's a respondent of 3. Okay.
I think what we've heard, as we've gone through this, is that number 2 was sort of the general basis for design, but the idea of having the P pop more like in option 1 was more important, and then having options where maybe it doesn't have a brick base and showing it different ways was the other thing. Other than that, I think we were in that's sort of the direction we feel like we've gotten.
Can I ask a quick question about option 2 with this sort of lighthouse finial? Is that going to stand up to the winds? I was just looking at it, wondering.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've done.
Yes.
Yeah, those panels are 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch thick aluminum. It's totally fine. We have done other projects that have similar cutouts to it.
The one thing about option 2 that I've heard from other people that I've spoken to is that the lighthouse image is pretty much the icon for Lewis when you look at it in many different ways. It's on the Chamber's website and elsewhere. And so from that standpoint, Rehoboth is different. The lighthouse connects us to our proximity to the water. It also, indicates that there's something going on here maritime that where the other 2 are more or less generic. The first option does follow the signage downtown to some extent, but it also follows the signage with the historic district. And I think it's not as a unique of identifier. And option 3 is, but I do think the P is very important, and that it should pop so it catches your eye.
I'd like to speak up and just endorse Bonnie's suggestion about doing a workshop, or I'd like to get more feedback, more support from the community about this project and the fiscal commitment that this will take. I don't care if it's done in one fell swoop or budgeted over several years. I think we need to take the pulse of the community.
Okay. All right.
And that, like, my only other addition to that, like I said, may be helpful, and to move it along to your point, John, is to say maybe come prepared with, hey, here, this parking signs would cost X, parking, and this would cost you, B, and the whole kit and caboodle will cost you. Where did you say 220,000? Is that what you said?
320.
Remember, I don't sell signs.
It's going to have to go out to bid. So whatever John gives you is his best estimate, and it's not. You can't take that to the bank, unfortunately.
I just want to get you in the right world so you can make decisions.
Right.
And when we do, especially if it's phased, I think it's something we might be able to have our maintenance staff install, which that would save the cost of the installation.
We had one town do that where they just bought the fabrication and then the town's staff installed the signs. When you get into, especially when you're talking about parking and the bike signs, which are rather simple, very similar to things that they're used to doing, that is very much a possibility.
And Anne-Marie, maybe a useful thing for us to do too, maybe Ricky can help us out with an inventory of signs that are on their last leg anyway that we would have to pay to replace,
And we've got, the signs that really are in need of replacement that we maintain are the street blades, the stop signs, the really traffic signs. We have not really done much on those directional signs. We do, and this is where I do want to make sure there are some of the parking signs. that we've talked about expanding, because sometimes people just don't realize that you have to pay to park and say that the signage is poor. So, you know, we were going to evaluate the parking signage. So I would be hesitant to spend a lot of money on signs for parking before doing this.
Before making a decision, yeah.
Right.
All right. So John, how quickly can you pull together some, you know, estimates on what's a parking sign cost and you know, those kinds of things?
I could do that for you by next week. I mean, I can do it quickly.
All right. Well, I think we're going to need a little more time than that to schedule a meeting, but it sounds to me like
I'll
we're
work
heading.
with Marie to schedule a workshop, and then we'll think of some strategies to get it out there a little bit more as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Doug Spellman just raised a question about what percentage of this project is parking component. And I think you could probably offer us some idea of what percentage of Rehoboth's project was a parking component. That might be a good bellwether. Okay.
Yeah, that's no problem.
But I guess one thing, is there a general sense that as he goes back to kind of flush that out, do we want to narrow it down from the three options to really look at it, or is everything part of the public workshop?
I would ask council what their opinion is.
I think that's one of the things that Bonnie is getting at, and I am too. You know, that's why I want the aesthetically. I don't necessarily want to be I would prefer more feedback from the town, because I'm not judging art or judging aesthetics. For me,
I think what I like to do is, as part of that workshop, I like to go ahead and do option 4 based on the comments we've gotten so far. But at the workshop, present all of them and say, you know, we did these 3. We've took feedback, and here's what the original 3 look like. We've landed on option 4 at the moment based on comments to date, and get the comments from everybody there. And then we have to make adjustments to that. Then we can make adjustments to that, and that would be where we would have a final landing that we would come back to this group with, as well as a more detailed breakdown of the cost at that point as well.
Okay. It sounds like a reasonable option, as I think, for you know, for where we are at this point. So I think there's no action to take here tonight except to have you work with Anne Marie to come up with a date.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, John and Jessica. Appreciate your time.
In terms of a date, do we want to wait till January at this point? Because
yeah, I think we ought to wait till the first.
Because we're not going to
week
get this
so.
done before next season.
No.
Okay. Is it?
Yeah, I think we'll schedule it like maybe the second week in January.
You have can I just ask one last question regarding your fiscal year and your budget planning? Do you have dates that you work with that we should be putting this together so you have that information?
Oh, well, so our fiscal year starts on April 1st. Our budget meetings will be in February. We will present a draft budget to mayor and council by February 1st. So
if we can have the meetings and this budget all together for you by then, you would have that information to inform that process.
Okay. That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, folks, we have spent a long time on these 3 projects, and I appreciate the discussion. It's certainly worthwhile. But it is 9 o'clock almost. So let's, in terms of moving things along, unless there's further comments for John, I think we should move on to getting back to the regular agenda. Okay. Thanks, John and Jessica. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, then moving back to the regular agenda, I'm moving to item E1, which is America Recycles Day. Obviously, this community is very much into recycling, and I encourage people to continue to do it, keeping in mind that you need to make sure that you understand what is recyclable and what is not. And then in terms of Small Business Saturday, our town is made up of all small businesses, and the importance of small business is very significant. And I know we've already taken action this year to help our small businesses. And many of them are still very much experiencing difficulties as a result of the shutdown that occurred in the spring. So small business Saturday is the day after, is the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And this year, I know the Chamber's been working to not only make it Small Business Saturday, but basically a small business weekend, encouraging people to shop small on both Saturday and Sunday after they've already had an opportunity to visit the larger box stores on Black Friday. So again, our small businesses are the backbone of the economy here. Moving then on to item E3 is presentation and possible action on the appointments of Parks and Rec Commission to fill the completed terms of Lorna Dempsey, Candace Vessella, Christine Besche, and Harry Geiser. I would ask the council consider the reappointment of Candace Vessella, Christine Besche, and Harry Geisler. Lorna Dempsey is going to be stepping down, and I would ask that you approve the appointment of Ed Tyson to take that position on the Parks and Rec Commission. Is there a motion? Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Bonnie, you're muted. We can't hear you. I'm seeing you mouth.
All right, second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The consent agenda consisting of the mayor and city council meeting minutes from October 12th. I think we had some corrections that were submitted, and Janine has made those corrections. We have mayor and council executive session meeting minutes, Board of Public Works meeting minutes, which I don't believe we have, financial activity reports, the police activity report, and we have a fire department activity report in this consent agenda, which we do not
We
have.
actually don't have the fire department report. We did not get it this month. I don't know what happened.
Right. So minus the fire department and the Board of Public Works meeting minutes, I think we can accept those by consensus.
Are we accepting the executive committee minutes?
Yes.
Executive session minutes by consensus?
Yeah.
I'd like to pull those out because I've got some corrections.
Okay. Are they substantial? Are they substantive? Or are they?
Well, first of all, I don't know, but
Okay.
I haven't finished reviewing them all.
Okay, so you want to pull those out for consideration next month?
Yes, please.
Okay, or at another
Yeah,
meeting.
I hadn't really had that chance to review those myself.
Okay, so then we're approving the meeting minutes from October 12th and the financial activity reports and the police activity reports by consensus. Okay?
I move approval of consent agenda on those terms.
Okay, so a second.
Second.
All in
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, then city managers report. Anne Marie.
I guess I should unmute. As Mayor Becker mentioned earlier, the Savannah Road Bridge project is finally done. And now we have the beautiful mosaic. Our Phase 24 streets program, along with the water main replacement on Coleman Avenue, and some of the crosswalks that we've discussed before at, Manila, Adams, Kings, and at Cedar and Savannah. That project will start hopefully this week. We're very close to the DELDOT permit, but it's been moving a little slow. But we do hope to have that underway this week. The Pilot Town Road water main replacement, actually, that project started today. The mayor mentioned that earlier. With COVID, we're kind of in a rhythm in terms of how things are working. We have our every other week meetings with the governor, continuing to work with the chamber. The Board of Health is meeting every 3 weeks. We do have a new chair for the Board of Health. I think the mayor did mention, because of a COVID case, we're shut down in City Hall for a couple of days with staff working remotely. We have several of us who will be quarantining for 14 days and working from home during that quarantine. And, keep rolling with the punches. As the departmental operations, the one thing I would note was our building permit activity was down a little bit in October compared to September. It was really high in September. So let's see. On October 1st, council and the mitigation planning team and planning commission had a joint meeting. That both the downtown parking committee and the beach parking committee began meeting in October. The beach parking committee met twice in October. They've now met 3 times. The downtown parking committee has met twice. Let's see, we've been working on incorporating changes based on comments on the personnel manual, which is on this evening's agenda. We've been, Glenn and Mayor Becker have spent a lot of time working on getting the details together for the Jones Farm purchase. Let's see, Janelle and staff from GMB have been working on the West Cedar Street flood study. The Planning Commission subcommittees have been working very hard also on their work. The 5 Points Working Group met on October 26th. It was a virtual meeting. And there was an oil spill, and I probably don't need to tell you any more about that because that's gotten a lot of airtime. So those are the highlights. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Are there any questions for Anne Marie? Hearing none, I think we can accept that report by common consensus. It's been a very busy month. The oil spill consumed an inordinate amount of time, and as well as other things. So it's been a very busy month for us. Then moving on then to item H1, a presentation of possible action on the proposed Lewis City Personnel Manual. I know we've had this on last month's agenda and we tabled it. It's back up on this month's agenda. Are we ready to consider this discussion at this point?
One thing I would point out, I just want to walk through what you have in the packet. The version of the personnel manual has a few changes. The changes are highlighted, so you can see where things have changed since you last saw it. The only other thing that we didn't highlight, just because we didn't change the content, we changed the structure. We ordered section 10 in a way that I think it makes better sense. We also did a survey of other municipalities about vacation, holidays, and sick payout upon separation. So we have that in there for you. So we're glad to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from members of the council?
Emery,
Rob?
I had suggested that you pull the benefits into an attachment. Has that been done?
We haven't done that. I didn't make any changes based on one-on-one discussions because I didn't want to make changes and then find out that there was another council person that wanted to go a different way. So I've really tried to keep
that was not a substantive change. That would have allowed us to focus on benefits separately from the policies.
Why would we want to do that?
That's the way I've dealt with it in another handbook that I work with. And the reason is so that we can address benefits separately and modify them more easily than generating an entirely new revision of the whole personnel manual. It's the benefits are something that are more fluid than the rest of the policy, in my opinion.
I disagree. I think if we're talking about benefits for your employees, that's a very, very serious matter. I think that they're actually, to a certain extent, more static than other aspects of a personnel manual. I don't think it's appropriate to do that. If you want to have a précis that is separate from the personnel manual, that it is a listing, that's fine for the, for both the, the use of the employees and the use of, supervisors. But I would leave the benefits where they belong, which is in the manual itself, where they have, where they are with the rest of the policies.
I disagree with that because I do think that benefits, in fact, we have modified benefits in previous years, a couple of times, I think, whereas the personnel policies are largely dictated, or to a great extent dictated, by federal and local law. And that we're not going to fiddle with without taking great care. But for instance, let me
We
address
can't fiddle with state and federal law.
Say again, please.
So we can't fiddle with state and federal law.
Exactly. So that's why they should be.
But I don't agree with your characterization that the majority of the personnel manual is simply a recitation of outside legal authorities. I don't think that's correct.
If I might continue.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. The question I'd like to address is the benefits. I've had a discussion with a couple of you about these. For instance, one of the things that's in the benefits is going to be a list of the holidays. And there's, I think, which holidays we observe is a very current question. And I think that's the kind of thing that might fluctuate quite easily, and that we should make it easier for ourselves to adjust than by burying it in the entire policy, so that we have to put out a policy revision in order to adjust our holidays. For instance, we have 2 holidays devoted to one group of historically oppressed Americans, and none that recognize another group of historically oppressed Americans. There was some movement to have Columbus Day recognize both the Europeans who arrived here and the Native Americans who suffered as a result. If we don't observe that day, then I think we are making a mistake. And yet we can't have too many holidays. We already have 12, and the 2 nonprofits I work with have 9. So I think we need to work with the holidays that we observe and how many we have. Another question I have is just how much sense it makes for us to give half a day's holiday for Return Day. That's a very peculiar and Sussex County specific holiday to observe. These are just 2 of the questions that I think deserve thinking about, that we don't have time to do tonight. I feel a little bit rushed, frankly, and I think it would be better if we could pull these out for consideration separately. Another aspect of the benefits that I'd like to discuss, and it's not a thing I think we should deal with lightly, is our 403B match policy. Right now, we say regardless of whether our employee contributes a single penny to his own retirement policy, we'll pay 9% of it into his fund. If that employee contributes a whole lot to it, we'll add another 1%. I think that incentive is skewed. Now that already reflects a very modest change we made in previous years. And it seems to me that another question we need to address is whether to, again, as we did the last time we adjusted benefits, again, to tier them so that people who are currently working for the city are less affected than those who come to work in the future with full disclosure of what their benefits will be. So these are questions I think deserve discussion, and it's 9:13. We have lots more to do tonight. I feel rushed.
Well, we could table the whole discussion of this personnel manual till next month if you wish. It might be the most efficient thing to do. That way you could work out whether or not we want to pull this out or not, and whether or not we want to support any of those changes. We need to get this done, but
Yeah,
if there's
I'm fine doing that. I guess the question to Robin is, was there anything in the personnel manual outside of the benefits that you found needs also our attention, that we could maybe remedy that part this evening?
The answer was, Andrew, there was nothing. I thought it was well done.
And do you, Rob, oh, excuse me, go ahead.
So I just wanted to continue. I did make some comments to it, but they've reflected in the body of the manual.
Right. And Rob, do you think, my question is, do you think by putting it off, deferring till a month, that we can accomplish what needs to be accomplished during the next 30 days?
I don't know.
You're not sure? Okay.
I mean, I guess my question is, putting it off for 30 days to talk about it, or is there direction of changes to come back?
Well, we need to meet again and probably to focus on this.
Well, would
Like a special. Go ahead.
Let me ask this question, because Rob, the kinds of issues that you're raising are very serious compensation questions, both for our current employees and for our future hiring efforts. So I don't see the sort of issues that you've raised being resolved in a month. I think they're much more serious, and they require the involvement of staff and council to look at these things. So I'd like to suggest that we approve what we have, with the understanding that we will get a group together to address the concerns that you're raising about the manual, which appear to be limited to the benefits sections. Is that a compromise way forward, so that the rest of it can be put in place?
It's not a compromise at all, Bonnie. It's basically, it approves the benefits that have been proposed.
Well, yes, but with the understanding that we will look at them.
We could
I mean,
always,
they're in place now, so simply approving the manual doesn't change anything that's not already in place. So we're getting to the same result, which is, if I understand what you want, which is to review the benefits.
Emery, I think that's, Bonnie has a good point, that when she says they're what's in place, I think they are largely in place. You haven't changed very much in them, I don't think.
No.
Is that correct?
Sorry, I was muted. There's a little bit that we changed. We added a level of vacation accrual between, instead of, and Ellen, Lorraine, and Christine, feel free to correct me because I'm going off memory.
Isn't that 15 to 20 years?
Well, right now, so we added a level at 5 years. Is that what it was, Ellen, Lorraine? So something in between. So right now you get 1 day a month, or 8 hours a month, for the first 10 years of employment. We upped it to 10 hours for that second. I mean, we could, and then we also altered the vacation sellback and the sick leave payout upon separation. What we could do, if you want to approve it status quo, those are the 3 main sections that address benefits. And the vacation, we can change all of those items to status quo, adopt it as they exist today, not as they are in the manual, and then have the discussion about benefits. Does that make sense?
It's another way to go. I'm frankly, I think that what you've got in there now is a slight improvement over what we had before. So I'm happy, not happy. I think that Bonnie's idea, given the time pressure, is a good one. I would like to see us not drop this.
So what, the couple things we have, our plan is to have this with an effective date of January 1, just because now if we're not, so it would have an effective date of January 1. If we want to have that more detailed discussion, we would still have time potentially to get something for January 1, but it would be tight.
I think I'm happy not rushing it.
Okay.
And so let's do what Bonnie suggests, but let's keep it, let's put it on our agenda. Whether it's December or January, I don't care.
Maybe the way to do this is when you make the motion to approve the changes that have been done or the manual as it is, recognize that we will continue, we will come back and address the issues of benefits.
We could do that. I don't think that's needed, Mayor, if you're willing to put it on the agenda. And I think
I'm willing to put it on the agenda, but you seem very uncomfortable with the idea of it falling off the table. And if you're more comfortable that way, we could entertain a motion like that.
Okay, that'd be fine. Then I would move that we approve the policy manual as it's been presented to us tonight, and that we discuss the benefits portion of the manual at the next convenient regular meeting.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it. Can I second it with a comment? That's fine. We can do it that way, or we can decide to have a smaller group work on it and then present something. But I second it.
Figure that out. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
All right.
Tim, you're muted, but I think I saw you mouth aye.
Yeah.
Is there any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the motion carries. All right, moving then finally to H3 is presentation of possible action on an ordinance to amend Article 4, use regulations and 10, streets and other infrastructures of Chapter 197 zoning of the municipal code of the city of Lewis, Delaware by adding wireless facilities section to 197-44 permitted uses and structures and section and 197-83 other utilities and possible action regarding the design standards. Planning Commission recommendation 641. Janelle, you're with us tonight. I know you've been working on this and you've talked to us about it in the past. We did, if you could bring us back up to date here where we are.
Absolutely. What this is we recognize the need for small cell wireless facilities to come into that will be coming into the city. So we're looking at creating regulations on how to process them. We've created an ordinance as to how they go through the process and design standards to address how they are processed and what they should look like, because we all know, as you were talking about the wayfinding, concern about making sure things look nice and that they fit into the character of the city. You did hold a public hearing. At that meeting, you heard from both representatives from Verizon and AT&T. You left the record open for additional comment. We received one comment from an individual who had concerns about health safety issues regarding the small wireless facility equipment. And we also received a letter from DelDOT regarding the regulations regarding the wireless facilities. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
And I note that we do have the people, both firms that were at our public hearing here as well tonight, if they have any comments to make.
May I just ask a question?
Sure, Bonnie.
This is just it looked like an incomplete sentence, so I just wanted to understand it. This is in the City of Lewis Design Standards, dated September 17th, 2020, at page 18. It's under waivers. The Lewis Police Commission may grant waivers of design standards where strict enforcement would materially inhibit deployment or where deviation from the standards, period. And it looked like something was missing there.
Can I weigh in on that?
Please.
We looked at that earlier, last week and earlier today, because you had raised questions last time we met about whether the waiver provision would allow enough time. Remember, you're under, the city's under standards to approve wireless communications facilities, either under a 60-day standard or a 90-day standard. So the question was whether we could get through a waiver process that allowed an application to the Planning Commission and then an appeal from the Planning Commission's decision to the City Council. So we went through a few iterations, Janelle and I did, and we're going to propose to you tonight that that section be revised to simply say the city manager, upon a recommendation of approval from the Planning and Development Department, may grant waivers from the design standards where strict enforcement would materially inhibit deployment or where deviation from the standards will serve the public interest. So will serve the public interest is the part that was left off of that sentence that you just raised. But under this scenario, it would be an appeal from the design standards that would first be submitted to Janelle, a written submission. She'd make a recommendation to the city manager. And if the recommendation was approval and the city manager agreed with that recommendation, there would be a waiver of the design standards. That process would not involve the Planning Commission or City Council, but it's one that we feel confident, certainly can meet those shot clocks that we're under while still giving some attention to, a request for a waiver of those design standards by not just one person, but a second person.
That's fine. The only thing I remember that one of the industry representatives suggested that change. My only question, I guess, for Anne-Marie is, does she want us to build in something that, where it is a really novel or complex or whatever situation that she could buck it up to council? Does she want an escape valve? I mean, or does council want her to have an escape valve? I guess, strictly. Just a thought. I mean,
good thought.
I'm looking at Glenn.
No, sure, I can comment. I think that's a great idea personally, because there are some instances where administratively there's just an application that comes before a city manager or a director of planning, and it's just too difficult to decide at that level. So to have that escape valve is always helpful, I think. And if you're under a 60 or 90-day shot clock, if it's only going to one body, not both the Planning Commission and City Council, I think we can get it done in that time. So we can make that addition to this waiver provision. If everybody's in agreement, that makes sense to me.
The only thing I'm thinking about here is I think a lot of this would be just meat and potatoes that Anne-Marie can do in her sleep. But this is a whole new area for us in terms of this 5G technology. And it just seemed to me there should be an option.
Good idea, actually, Bonnie. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments on this ordinance?
I had a comment just with respect to, it's related with respect to asking for waivers. One of the industry participants indicated that the design standard ideally would be 150 feet per tower, and we're putting in 300. So given that, I anticipate that we may see quite a volume of these waivers coming through to us, because it seemed like it would be a difficult system to set up by putting it 300 feet apart, the way that we're suggesting it. So that's a comment, to consider.
So one thought, and I've done this before with other types of ordinances. If you have it restrictive and you feel, and then we realize it's too restrictive, it's always easier to ease a restriction than to put in a new restriction if it's not
more restrictive.
Right. So I think if we were to find that we're getting a lot of waiver requests, we would come forward and say, yeah, I think it's time to look at this. But then I don't know that necessarily should be your starting position, because it's harder to unwind it if you're very generous at the beginning.
And then just the only other question I had was just, can someone just refresh me why Second Street is a non-starter in terms of putting, obviously we all appreciate the significance of Second Street, but is it again a viable system if we totally eliminate Second Street as a potential area for these towers?
That was just something we had heard when we were going through the process. That is something you can definitely look at. I think one of those items would be if that could also fall under the waiver request, is if there's nothing that feasible that they would need to put one there. So that's definitely something that could fall under that waiver.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I did have one more question, was just with respect actually to the public comment that came in. It didn't look like a name was associated with that public comment.
There was not.
Are we able to even accept that then as public comment? Do we know where, not having known where it generated from?
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's described as no reply. I've not met that person.
I believe that falls under a Glenn question.
Yeah, I think that's an invalid comment.
Yeah, you can give it whatever amount of weight you want. Certainly, when the author is unknown, you know that you can give it less weight than you would, you know, somebody who's in the industry and lives in the city and has all those sorts of other criteria that might elevate their comment.
Okay.
I also want to.
I'd like to take a minute, just speak to what Andrew spoke to with respect to Second Street. It's my understanding of this small cell technology is that it actually, we should anticipate that for 5G small cell to be deployed on Second Street, and that would be a targeted area for that type of technology. We should anticipate that there will be a need for small cell infrastructure to be placed there. So, and I'm only basing that based upon, you know, the conversations with AT&T representative and what I've learned about small cell design over the last couple of months. So it seems to me that the statement that we have in the design standard found on page 17 of 25 under historic district number A or letter A, where it says that there shall be no small cell wireless facilities on Second Street. I think we're setting ourselves up for failure, and I don't think that's a good thing for us to have in our design standard.
Maybe we should have a higher hurdle there in terms of, rather than it being something that's permitted out of the box, that somebody, a carrier, a provider that wants to put, you know, poles down Second Street has to make a higher showing or something, if that's even something we can do legally. And I guess the other question is, Janelle, do we have any information about how other historic towns have handled the installation of this kind of infrastructure in their core areas?
Yes, we actually used some some of the examples that we used creating this was from historic districts. They didn't, I think there was like one place that prohibited it, but most had just higher standards, which is some of the things we are actually requiring, is that if you're going in the historic district, it needs to look like something that belongs in the historic district.
Right.
Now, referencing that, some language was provided and is in the packet from the providers, is that they amended that line to be, there shall be no small cell wireless facilities on Second Street absent applicant providing evidence that there are no viable alternatives such that the applicant will be materially inhibited by providing service. So they did provide some language as an option for that section. It's not in our version, it's in their comments. It's on in the packet.
Page 24.
Right, and
Yeah.
who makes the no other viable means decision?
I think that would come down to that waiver and then potentially then pushed to council.
Okay. Thank you. I just also want to give a shout out to the Planning Commission because they worked really hard on these design standards, and it was not an easy undertaking in a novel area. So they did. I think they did a terrific job.
Any other comments?
Let me see.
Would you like to make a comment, Andrew?
No, I guess I did have a question. You know, we talked about the one public comment, but were there any other comments that came in regarding concerns around, that was it? Okay.
Yeah, that was all.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a motion regarding this?
Before you do, let me remind you, I think that, Janelle, correct me if I'm wrong, the design standards have already been approved, is that right? So you want to approve them with this one modification to the waiver section in addition
No,
to
nothing has been approved as of this, but I'm gonna guess you could probably do it in two different motions, one to approve the ordinance and then one to approve the design standards with changes, because from what I've heard, there are no proposed changes to the ordinance, but there are potentially proposed changes to the design standards.
That's what I've heard too.
as well. So here's the waiver proposal, just so I can get this on record. So it says waivers. The city manager, upon a recommendation of approval from the Planning and Development Department, may grant waivers from the design standards where strict enforcement would materially inhibit deployment or where deviation from the standards will serve the public interest. However, the city manager may refer a waiver request to the mayor and city council for a determination when, in the city manager's sole discretion, the request presents unique circumstances appropriate for such review and determination.
All right.
You know, the genesis of this document, was this from your review of other municipalities' ordinances? Was this proposed by by Verizon? How did this come to us?
So the ordinance came from some standard ordinances that are through the cities and throughout the country, and the design standards were the same thing. We did research, we pulled certain design standards and determined what made sense for the city of Lewis.
So you took from other already enacted?
Yes, from about almost a dozen different ones. We read and looked through and, got ideas and then created ours.
That's great, thank you.
Glenn, can you comment on any growing pains that Rehoboth may have seen from bringing this on that we haven't thought of in our ordinance, or?
So they're still, relatively young in this process as well. One thing that they didn't do, which is really just an application procedural thing, is that they waited for the certification that the wireless facility was compliant with the radio frequency emission standards till after the installation happened. And we learned because of public comment in Rehoboth Beach that there's a real concern about radio frequency emissions. So now they're requiring that the engineer's certification based upon the design is included with the application. So there's some expectation that it will comply with the radio frequency emissions on the front end. But that's really at the staff level, but that's the only growing pain that I've seen there that hasn't somehow gotten worked into this ordinance already.
And Glenn or Janelle, what is the time pressure for us to adopt this? Is this holding up an installation of technology that we want?
No, there's no current application. We have had several express light interest, but as stated at the public hearing, there is no certain time frame that would be coming.
Thank you.
Well, what is your pleasure, council? Do you want to make a motion to approve this with, we have two motions we need, one for the ordinance and one for the design standards, but are we ready to approve the ordinance? Let's deal with that first.
I'd move we approve the ordinance.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance as written. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Tim?
Yeah, I'll go with it.
Rob?
Aye.
Okay, great. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we have the design standards. We've got one modification, actually we've got two modifications, one to the possibility of addressing Second Street and the other one regarding waivers. Is there any further discussion about the design standards at this point?
I'd like to raise one more on page 17 of 25 under historic district, letter E. It says new structures are discouraged within the historic district. The historic district is more than Second Street, certainly, and I'm not quite sure how we can manage, if you will, the telecommunication companies by restricting them from, or discouraging them, I'm sorry, from putting in new structures if we expect to have 5G, if they need to have structures within the historic district. I hope I made sense with that statement.
I think if you read the bullets underneath that, it just sets out some guidelines as to how those structures would look, that they would have to be consistent with the street signposts, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think that provides a lot of latitude there for someone to do
Yeah, it
something.
contextualizes the statement. It's just a curious statement that we say that we're discouraging it, and then we codify it right away.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
The intent there was to encourage co-location on an existing pole or structure
Sure.
before the construction of a new structure, because we want to make sure that we're using what's already there, especially in the historic district, and to keep that current aesthetic. But we also recognize that there will be some places where that is not possible. So if you're going to have to build a new structure, you build it to certain standards.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
if you
intent
look-
of that.
If you look at some of the historic district area, some of it still has Cobra lighting in it.
oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah, there's not much historic integrity in those areas.
Yes.
Right.
So are you okay with that comment then? With the-
Yeah, I can live with it. Yeah, I can live with it.
So is there a motion to approve the design standards with the two changes that we have made to them?
I so moved.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. Is there a second?
I'll second. With the changes in place, I'll second.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve the design standards with the two changes that we made. One we're dealing with waivers and the other dealing with the historic district. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Moving on then, thank you very much, Bonnie and John, for being here. Thank you. Then moving on to item I1 is presentation of possible action on granting a permanent easement and a temporary construction easement to DelDOT in the vicinity of Atlantic Drive for sidewalks on Savannah Road. I don't think Darren's here tonight.
I don't think Darren doesn't need this is something that DelDOT requested of us, and it's really they're constructing sidewalks pretty much on the entire length of Savannah Road up in the vicinity of the high school, where there are sidewalk gaps, and they need a permanent easement from us for Atlantic Drive and temporary construction easements. So the documents are all in the packet with the diagram showing where they are. It's pretty straightforward, but I don't sign easements.
It is, yeah.
Unless you guys
Actually, this is a very good thing for public safety that is being done here. So creating an easement to go across Atlantic Drive will help things pedestrian-wise. It'll also help those people who have children, perhaps Andrew, your son, if he were to go to Cape Antelope High School, your sons, this would be a way for them to get to school, a safe route to school kind of thing. So.
I'm not an easement expert, but I'm delighted that they're continuing pushing the sidewalks out for the safety of the kids.
Exactly. Yep. Okay.
And
Okay. Is there a motion to approve this permanent and temporary easement as requested?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Andrew. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Andrew and Tim, did you respond?
I'm okay with it. I have concerns, but that's okay.
Any
Let's go on.
opposed? Okay.
I'm sorry?
I asked if there was any opposed. I just didn't hear you initially, and I asked him. But if you're opposed, you're fine. You could be opposed.
No, that's okay.
So hearing no objection, the motion carries. Moving then on to item I2 is presentation and possible action, restructuring of the police department staffing. We've had quite a bit of discussion about this, and I don't know that we're ready to talk about this tonight. I know that we've had some discussion with the chief, and I think he's got a proposal here for us to consider that would change the structure of sergeant and corporals within the department. Chief, you want to comment on this? You're muted. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, nothing more to add. I think we've talked about it and covered it. I support the move. I think it makes sense for internal consistency and unity of command for the police department.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from members of council? Yes, Bonnie.
Well, I'm gonna ask that we delay this. It's my understanding that it's not time critical, and in saying that, I just want to be very clear that I'm not asking that it be delayed because I necessarily don't agree with it, but I'm just not comfortable yet, and I want to talk to the chief a little more, and I apologize, I haven't had a chance to. So unless there is a time criticality, I would request that it be put off for a month. And my understanding is there isn't, because the test for promotion has to be selected. There's a study period, et cetera. So I don't think it causes a problem, but chief, if it does, let me know.
I don't think
Can I ask?
we're even going to be in a position to have the exams until sometime in January.
Yeah, I didn't think so either. So I'm just not sure. This would lead to an interesting supervisory structure, and I just want to give it a little more thought. So, and I apologize that I hadn't been able to make up my mind, but I would request your indulgence.
Chief, would that affect your ability to begin a new promotion list?
No, I don't believe so.
Thank you.
Is there any objection to deferring action on this tonight?
If it's not time critical, if there's some time and to put it off for 1 month, I don't have a serious objection to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So it looks like everyone's nodding their head at this point, and they're not, and so we will defer action on this and pick it up at our December meeting. Okay.
It's quarter to 10. I'm sure everybody wants to put it off.
We're nodding for another reason.
Well, I was about to say that, but I decided I better not. So. All right. So we need to elevate Janet to talk to us for item I4, which is presentation of possible action on the 2021 Canal Front seasonal boat slip rental. We have a lottery, and Janet has assembled the list of applicants, and she needs to draw the names of those who will be offered slips at the Canal Front Park.
So Janet
has been elevated. If she would unmute herself, she can talk to us. Janet, can you unmute? Lower left-hand corner of your screen. There you are. Good.
There I am.
Great. We
And
got you.
I apologize. I don't have video, and I think, there I am.
there you are. You do have video.
There
I
you are.
do. My apologies. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So we did have quite a bit of interest in the seasonal lottery. What I would like to do is read the names of those who are eligible for the slips based on their residency within the municipality of the city of Lewis. We had 11 eligible candidates for the small slips, of which there are 9. So I can start with those names first. I do have all the names in a little basket here, which we'll draw from. The eligible candidates are in no particular order: Josh and Jean Lee, Brian Kowalski, Safa Mutaseb, and I apologize if I'm getting any of these names pronounced incorrectly, Martin Young, Larry Rouse, Roger Campbell, David Meehan, Mario and Carol DiSabatino, Edward Hartsfeld, Albert Keller, William and Jill Hicks. So those are all of the eligible candidates for the small slips, and I will start to pull from the basket here. The first lottery winner is Martin Young. Second draw for the small slip is Larry Rouse. Third candidate for the small slip is Roger Campbell. Fourth candidate for the small slip, Mario and Carol DiSabatino. Fifth candidate for the small slip, David Meehan. Sixth candidate for the small slip is William and Jill Hicks. Seventh candidate for the small slip is Brian Kowalski. And the eighth candidate is Edward Hartsfeld. And the final candidate, the 9th spot for the small slip, Josh and Jean Lee.
Okay, thank you.
So those remaining will be placed on a wait list, and we can move to the large slips. We have 3 large slips available, and we have 5 candidates. The names are in no particular order: Harold Feldman, Kenneth Kehrer, Ronald Cohen, Robert Norton, and Charles Messina. So again, they've all been placed in the box here and in no particular order. For the large slips, the first lottery winner is Kenneth Kehrer. Drawing again for the second is Ronald Cohen. And the third and final slot is Charles Messina.
Okay.
So again, those who were not selected in the drawer will go on the wait list, as will the remainder of the applicants who were not from the municipality of the city of Lewis.
Great. Janet, thank you very much. Very well done.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Mhm.
My pleasure.
Right.
That wasn't like Shirley
Pardon?
Jackson's lottery.
What did you say?
I said I'm glad that wasn't like Shirley Jackson's lottery. You're
Oh,
familiar with, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I don't think we need to take any action. We've drawn, Janet has drawn the names, and you'll be contacting those individuals and following up.
Yes,
with them.
I
So,
will be sending out a letter and the
contract.
contracts, yes.
Okay, great. All right, so then I think we can move on to item I6, which is presentation of possible action on the sale of the Tennessee Avenue lots. Anne Marie, you want to talk to us about that? I know lots have been advertised, and we've sold one, and we have 2 lots that we've been talking about, and I think you have a contract to talk to us about.
Yeah, so I've got a written offer from Cole and Tanya Flickinger that reflects the asking price. And what we would do is extend a small piece of Tennessee Avenue where we had not completed the paving to the end, which we've gotten the estimate to do that. Obviously, it would be a 99-year lease. So with your authorization, we would have Glenn's firm move forward with drafting the lease and working with the purchaser's attorneys to move towards settlement.
Okay, great. Any questions or comments from the table? Hearing none, is there a motion to have Anne Marie and Glenn move forward with the sale of these 2 lots?
I would move that Anne Marie and Glenn move forward with the sale of the 2 lots on Tennessee Avenue.
Terrific. Thank you. Is there a second?
So it looks like, yeah, Councilperson Morgan's he moved and seconded, but I couldn't hear him for some reason. So let the record reflect.
Yeah, you're too far from your mic, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to accept that as a second.
Sure.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. I want to thank the public for their interest in the sale of these lots, and these were 3 lots that were just sitting fallow. It's good to have them turned into production and to functional use. Moving then on to I7 is a presentation of possible action to initiate a minor subdivision process for Sussex County Tax Map 3-35-4.20-1.00 to identify the Children's Beach House as separate from Lewis Beach. This is a very convoluted story that involves a discrepancy between a 1935 survey and a 1950s survey, in which apparently the Children's Beach House was actually then merged onto Lewis Beach, and there was never carved out separately. The Children's Beach House actually discovered this as they were making application for some financing. And I think the action proposed here will create a separate entity for the Children's Beach House from what is now the entirety of Lewis Beach, running from Roosevelt Inlet all the way down. So, Anne Marie, what would you like to add to that?
I would not add anything other than this really kind of cleans up something that we didn't realize existed.
I have a question. If it's part of a minor subdivision process, do we need to send this to the Planning Commission for review?
I had the same question.
So I think, so typically a minor subdivision application starts at the Planning Commission and doesn't get referred. The reason this is coming to you first is because the parcel that we're talking about is a city parcel. So yes, it would most likely go to the planning commission unless we can figure out a way to do it as a lot line adjustment. We can only do that if they're not creating additional parcels, but there is a right of way that goes through that we would have to look to see if that would affect the ability to do it that way. So it will most likely go to planning commission, but it's possible that it could be done administratively. If it goes to planning commission, it comes back to you for approval.
Is that address your concern, Andrew and Rob?
Yeah, I just want to follow the process. If we require this of other parcels, and
Yeah, it's going to go through whatever the process is. It's just that because it's a city-owned parcel that we're starting with, I don't want to start the process without council's authorization.
So we're either, the motion would be either to do what's appropriate, which would either be directing staff to look at a lot line adjustment to make this.
Or minor subdivision.
Or referring this to the planning commission for a minor subdivision process.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Would you like to make that motion?
I think I just did.
Okay.
Sorry, but I didn't quite follow that. It's a motion to do which?
I think, well, you see, I'm not sure based on what Anne Marie said. I'm not, my personal view is that we should send this to the planning commission. Right. And do it according to Hoyle. But since this is city property, if it truly is something as simple as a lot line adjustment, which it doesn't sound right. So, how about if I do this? How about if I just make the motion to refer this to the planning commission to consider a minor subdivision, and somebody can give a friendly amendment if they think that's wrong.
I will just second it as is, as stated.
There we go.
It's cleaner if we do it that way.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification, Rob.
Yeah, the one thing that's a little bit unique here is it looks like the old original lease that was granted to them does include this area. So we wondered if administratively we could do something, because a city council many, many years ago did authorize a lease for this area. It's just that the actual parcel never got created and no tax parcel ID number was given to it. So it's got a little bit of a wrinkle in it, but I think it's something that can be dealt with relatively quickly by the planning commission, if that's the direction you're going.
That's another question I had, I guess, is what's the sensitivity to the Children's Beach House in terms of their financing and the need to have this cleaned up?
They're okay. We've been talking to them about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you explain something to me, please? When I look at this this engineered plat, if you will, what part of this parcel is city owned that you're describing as city owned? Is it? Could someone please explain that to me?
Well, if you look at the parcel, it's the whole beach is one parcel, and there's this little jaw. There's like a sawtooth that ducks in, which is where the Children's Beach House is.
It would be the area to the north of the right-of-way. So if you see, it looks like there's this right-of-way and a road, and then you can see where actually the building for the Children's Beach House is, and then beyond that is the beach. The area north of the right-of-way is is being discussed.
Okay, it was confusing because it's not marked on this plat itself, and I wasn't quite sure. Right. The other question I had was on this same engineer drawing, it actually shows tax map information. Did any of you notice that? And I was wondering.
That's for the main parcel.
Well, what is the main? That's okay. Therefore, what is the main parcel then?
The main parcel is the beach.
It's the whole beach. It's the entirety of the beach from Roosevelt Inlet down, Tim.
On the other side of the right-of-way, there are 4 separate parcels of land.
Right.
That's not what's being discussed. This is just everything to the north of the right-of-way, where the actual physical building is. That's what's being discussed. That does have a tax parcel number because it is Cindy-owned land. And that's what they're looking to subdivide out based on the lease.
Okay, so are you telling me that they're trying to, need to separate the parcel where the children's beach house is placed from the lots that are closer to Cedar? Is that what we're doing?
No,
No,
from
they're
the
taking
beach.
from the beach.
From the beach.
From the beach itself.
Right.
Correct. This is just a holistic plan showing the properties under the jurisdiction of the Children's Beach House. It was the best graphic that we had at the time, but really it's not the 4 parcels below, it's the parcel to the north or to the east across from the right-of-way that's adjacent to the beach is being proposed to be subdivided out.
Huh. Wow. I did
Are you
not
with us now,
understand
Tim?
this. I'm sorry?
Are you with us now on that one?
Not really. I'm sorry to
Well,
say. I did not.
the whole
I
parcel.
spent a lot of time reading this and looking at, Sussex County tax maps and so forth, and I did not understand this.
You see the area that's bolded and the heavier black line, that's the parcel that's trying to be created. It spans all 4 of the lots.
Right.
Okay, thanks for pulling it up, Anna Marie. Or
Yeah.
Janelle did it.
Yeah, so
Thank
it's,
you.
if you can see the cursor, it's the area that I'm going around with the cursor. That's what's
Correct.
being discussed tonight.
That whole black area.
Yeah, this area.
Right. And as it is right now, I guess where I'm a little confused, Janelle, is the statement that has been made that it's city property. Is that the statement that's been made so far? Is that correct?
Yes.
I don't understand
This is
that
part of
statement.
the beach parcel of land. So the beach is a parcel of land that goes from Roosevelt Inlet all the way down, and this is on that parcel of land.
Okay.
So what they're looking to do is to cut this rectangular shaped parcel out to create a separate parcel so it is no longer part of the city-owned beach.
Oh, okay. Now, thank you very much. Appreciate that explanation. Thank you, everyone, for indulging me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I think we have a motion from Bonnie and a second from Rob on this. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Moving on then to item I8, presentation of possible action to set a public hearing on amendment to the zoning map to revert property located at 203 Savannah Road, Sussex County Tax Map 335 4.0-189.00 and 190.00 from R3 to GC in accordance with section 197-104F. If you'll recall, this property was rezoned to residential. We now are being asked to revert it back to commercial as it had been done, as it was in the past. Any discussion here?
I've got a question, Ted. There was some discussion, I still remember, that this parcel might properly be marine commercial. Janelle, do you have an opinion on that or any views on that?
That it would be better suited for marine commercial.
Yeah.
I have not looked at it as to whether or not it should be that. I just know right now the process it's going through is to revert back to the previous zoning, which was the general commercial.
Bob, I think your thought on marine commercial was that the marine commercial district is pretty much up from Massachusetts Avenue or American Legion up to the canal and down Anglers Road, and it didn't come out this far. There was a pretty good sized residential hyphen between Massachusetts Avenue and this parcel and the other parcels where the Dairy Queen and Two Dip are located. And that's why I think it was left regular commercial.
Okay.
And there are parcels to the west along Savannah that are also adjacent to this that are zoned general commercial.
Yeah.
Well, I thought they used to be, but aren't anymore. Along Savannah.
Along Savannah, sorry.
Because Cape Henlopen Drive parcels used to be commercial.
And they are currently residential.
Right.
They're all residential.
Yeah. No, thanks, Ted. That helps.
Okay.
And do I understand correctly that this, change it back to general commercial will require that there be paperwork or some application filed with the state plus people? Is that correct?
That would be for.
And then also a reconciliation with the comp plan.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So that application has already been submitted to Plus,
Okay.
and the amendment to the comprehensive plan for the future land use map is moving forward. So it would be considered at the same time as the change of zone application, or around that same time, so they would be consistent.
Okay. And are there costs that the city is incurring by going to having to file with Plus and also the comp plan change?
There is no fee for the application to the Plus.
And what about comp plan, that filing, so forth? Is that just
No,
administrative?
there's no fee for us to make the change. There's no fee for that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion to move forward with this, please? We need to set a public hearing. Anne Marie, have you looked at dates for a public hearing at all?
I did, and it looks like the week of December 7th is,
okay.
We don't have any evening things that I see on the public calendar. But we can change
How
that.
did that happen?
Yeah, we can change
We'll
that.
change that here and now.
All right. Do you want to try and do it on Tuesday, the 8th of December?
That's good for me.
It's for me at 6.
Good.
6.
That's fine for
And then
me.
it'll be a Zoom call, right?
Yep.
That will be a Zoom call, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, 6 o'clock.
We're
so
going
we-
to, we said December 7th?
December 8th.
8th.
Oh, 8th. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
All right, so that's a public hearing.
So we need a motion to set that date, please.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item I9 is presentation of possible action on instruction of the financial officer to liquidate investments necessary to go to settlement on the purchase of the Jones Farm. As you know, we are working with the Board of Public Works and the county towards the acquisition of Jones Farm, and we are slated for a settlement not later than November 30th. Currently, they are trying to move that settlement up before Thanksgiving, and all the pieces are coming together, but we do need $1.5 million plus the settlement costs to go to settlement, and we need to authorize Ellen Lorraine to access those monies. Ellen Lorraine, you want to comment on what your strategy is here on how you're going to do that? Or Andrew?
Do you want me to speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I will look at our cash levels first before going into any investments. And I think between our cash levels, we'd be able to funds.
Okay.
Great.
Terrific. Any further discussion on that? We have a motion to authorize Ellen Lorraine to proceed.
I'll make a motion for Ellen Lorraine to proceed to liquidate funds for the purchase of the Jones Farm.
And I'll
Thank
second that motion.
Thank you, Bonnie. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is an executive session. Do we have anything to discuss tonight? So I don't think we're going to be having one. So I think we could move towards adjournment. Thank you all very much for a very long evening and your attention. I think we've accomplished a lot, so had some very good discussions. There's a lot to think about. And we will be coming back to look further at that liquid natural gas thing. We'll gather some more information in the ensuing period here so we can hopefully come up with something that we want to move forward with. Any other comments this evening?
Just grateful to the people who are attending for these 3.75 hours that we've been talking.
Yes, yes, I appreciate everyone's attendance. We've dropped from 39 down to 22, but that's still a lot.
Not bad.
Not bad. So
Not
anyway,
bad.
all right. So thank you all very much. We do have a city council meeting scheduled next week, as Anne Marie noted earlier. But for those of you who may not choose to participate next week, we wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. So we have a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much and good night. Thank you.
Night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.